Good evening, everyone. It's 7:32, 10th of August, and we are going into session. A quick reminder that we will not be having our next two sessions in August, as many people will be away or on vacation, and everybody could use a little bit of a break. So just wanted to put that out there for everyone. Let's do the pledge and then move on to the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're doing attendance.
We don't take attendance at work sessions.
Every week, 2 years, every other week, same conversation. I'm in a different room. I noticed the lighting on my head is looking like some sort of a weird, to move to a different space in my house today. Okay, I'll keep moving my head around till I like the way I look. All righty, let's move on. Do we have announcements, folks?
I do, Mayor, if I may.
Deputy Mayor, you're on.
Thank you. I'm not sure. Well, I just want to kind of bring that to the attention of. I want to give a big ceremonial festival. I guess not a festival. It's an Independence Day for the Spanish for the Ecuadorian community. So I want to give a shout out to all the Ecuadorians celebrating August 10, which in Spanish is El Primer Grito de América, which is the first yell of independence from the Spaniards at that time. So today we actually celebrate that, and Ecuador is celebrating all that. That actually it starts today, or it started this whole week. Is pretty much what they do. But we do have the Ecuadorian committee actually here in Westchester. They do put a great event together, and I'm not sure if anybody has the opportunity to gone to Crown Point Park. So this time is actually in August 14, starts at 10 o'clock to 7 p.m. It's great food, great Spanish music, typical Ecuadorian music, of course. So it's a big event, and it's been happening since I remember. So it's definitely close to, I want to say 20 years that I've been in this country, more than that. I've been here more than 20 years. So just in case, but it's a great event, and it's a great location too. So if you guys want to have great Spanish food, definitely stop by on Sunday, the 14th to Crown Point Park. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Hey, do they have a larger community in Crown than we have in Austin? That's not even possible.
No, it's not. It's actually location.
It's just because Crown Point Park is
a
great venue.
Correct. I think many years ago they tried to do something here in Austin. It just there wasn't a big venue for that at that point. So they started doing something. They tried to do something in Peekskill. At that time, it just didn't work. And working with the county at that point, that's my understanding for the Ecuadorian committee. So they decided to do that there. Yeah.
Wonderful. I'll try to drop by. That sounds like a great event. Thank you. And who else had some announcements? No one. My only announcement is for people to stay cool and to stay hydrated. It's a major heat wave going on. Today was a little bit nicer, but not much. And I think there are lots of summer events. The mayor's message talks, there are at least 3 different types of concerts. There's one tonight, unfortunately, on Wednesday in the village, and we can't go. But on Wednesdays, there's lots of music, a lot of fun fare, great time to then go visit some of the restaurants and have desserts and coffee and all the other fun stuff. So those are the big announcements that I have. August is always a little bit of a slower month, so here we are. Village Manager, you are on.
Good evening, everybody. and congratulations and celebrations for the Ecuadorian community. Thank you, Trustee Quesada, for bringing us up to speed on that. Our first agenda item is a wonderful opportunity for us here in Ossining. A few weeks ago, Bill Garrison and I met with Dr. Jeremy Wood to discuss the plans that he and his wife have for donating their time and effort and resources to create a wildflower meadow garden in Sparta Park. So with that, I would like to turn over. We have a brief presentation that Dr. Wood put together about what their plans are, what that would entail for the village, and how it would improve our park space. So we would be, this would be a donation, and upon the board's review, we would need a resolution to accept it, as we do all donations and contributions. So welcome. So Dr. Wood and Ms. I'm Schlinger. I'm sorry.
No worries. Very nice to meet you all.
She's the real doctor.
Okay.
But we're both excited about this, and Karen, we're excited that you welcomed the proposal. So Katya is better at the screen sharing, but as you mentioned, there is a proposal or a presentation. So you can do that.
Okay. Sitting there. Oh. Sorry, I'm a bit not that good at that.
No pressure at all.
We're getting there. Slideshow.
And it's loading. Can you see our screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good. And you can't see us. Okay. So this is us, Jeremy and Katya. That happens to be my email address and my phone number, but we work together. You guys probably all know this, but I have a couple slides on where this is. So it's here, north of Scarborough, and maybe this shows it better. This is Sparta Park here, and this is the lot in question. This is Scarborough Manor, which seems very close, but is up there on, I forget the name, the little hill it's on has a name, but it seems, when you're in the space, it feels distant, though it looks close, on this presentation. My house, or our house, slightly not too relevant to this, it happens to be here. Just another view. This is the lot in question in yellow. This is Sparta Park. This is Sparta Dock. I think this is also part of Sparta Park. This is our house. Scarborough Manor, as I mentioned, is up on the hill. You don't see it much, but all the land here is theirs. I don't think we're going to intrude on that, but it may be relevant that they're the owners of the adjoining property. So the advantage, this is obviously already an existing park. It has a lot of parking, and a good number of people already come there. And a little pet peeve of mine, the view from down there and the lot, the lot we're talking about is off here to the left. The view is quite nice. And I happen to be a big fan of, this is a nice maple tree, and next to it is a nice willow tree. I think they're very nice. But like in the higher ground in the park, like on the slide on the right, you can't see the river at all. So one small bonus of this plan is that it would offer a good, comfortable location in Sparta Park where people could actually see the river. Okay, now we're getting to it. The lot is currently overgrown with vines. This is the willow I mentioned, which I think is beautiful, as is this maple tree. These trees here, I think are nice. They don't exactly fit our plan for a wildflower meadow, but they're there, they're nice. My plan would be to leave them there, but it's your land, it's not my land. So that's my plan. And then what we're talking about is the rest of this area here, which I think you could see is just one mass of vines. I don't think you can see the stinging nettles that are back there, but they are. Wildflower Meadows, this happens to be one that gets a lot of attention in Central Park. They have a lot of flowering plants. They're good for the environment. They support bees, birds, and all manner of wildlife. The current thinking is we don't have enough meadows these days because of development, because undeveloped land tends to fill in with trees and forest, and the wildflower plants down at the ground don't get enough light. And the last one, what you see before, the invasive species, in this case, the vines. I mean, I don't think vines are terrible, but I think there should be more to, you know, a green area than just 100% vines. As I mentioned, sort of, typically you create a wildflower meadow by killing everything that's there and planting wildflower seeds. And wildflower seeds are seeds that come from wildflowers of that region. You don't just go buy generic wildflower seeds and throw them. You want ones that are, you know, more typical to this particular area, and that's what we would purchase. But as I mentioned, we would keep these trees that are here that are nice, I think, along the side. And if we found something attractive under the vines, you know, we might, something attractive and, you know, natural looking, I think our inclination would be to keep it and not kill it and replace it. But again, it's not our land. And eventually, I think we should have a short, it's not a large area, but I think it could support a short trail and seating. I gather from talking to the village manager and the parks director, these get into ADA and access. The trail gets a little complicated. So I think that might be part of the second stage. So, you know, I don't know how much we'll talk about it tonight, but it's not part of the short, let's say.
That's it.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
So this is basically part of Sparta Park, but it looks like it's an unused part of it, from what I can tell.
Technically, it's not currently part of the park. It's village-owned lot.
Oh.
But I mean, you have your
So
village
it's not
council.
really a
here.
Sparta Park enhancement, because you wouldn't really be dealing with the main part of the park there. It would be the area directly in front of your house, correct?
Yes,
On the side, yeah.
On the side.
next to the
In
park.
front. It's between
Right,
your
not
house.
dealing with the
It's between your
exist-
house and the Hudson River, correct?
Yes, and not
Okay.
dealing, not changing in any way what's now Sparta Park.
Right. Okay. Sparta is a architectural design, a historic district. I don't know if that matters in this case. I don't know if planting wildflowers falls under the purview of the HPC, but it is village-owned property, so I don't know. I don't know if it would or not, but I don't know if that's anything to think about.
Right.
And you would do the bulk of the work, or would you have a crew come in, or clear the land, or we would do that, or?
My hope is that I could do it. or that we could do it.
All by yourself?
by hand.
I take on these things. Sometimes they end up way bigger than I anticipated, but I'm capable of pulling out vines. And then if they grow back, I'm capable of pulling them out again. For starters, that's certainly step 1 and 2 and 3. I'm capable of that. So yeah.
We have also a very good friend who is an architect,
Landscape architect.
landscape architect, and we are planning to get his advice and design potentially for the garden.
Yeah, I've consulted with him. At the moment, without the path and the first stage seems rather straightforward, though I would plan to consult with him. About the historic guidelines, I studied the heck out of them and went through an approval process when we got this house built. I don't think there's anything in there about plants, but I think I get the spirit of that, and I think that what we're doing is in keeping with the old, what was here, then not trying to make it too pretty, not trying to make it look old by using new stuff. Those are lessons I got from those guidelines, and I think what we're talking about here is in that spirit.
Is that anything the neighborhood would have to weigh in on or not? The neighbors, have you discussed this with other residents in Sparta?
I ran into one neighbor this evening on my way home from the train station, and I think he's watching because he said he would be. He was supportive. Legally, if we need to ask their opinion, I don't know. That's
the Jug Tavern of Sparta does a lot of
yes
projects and plantings and stuff. Would you consider?
And I gathered that I gathered that they are considering doing something similar, ripping out something they have and putting in a wildflower garden.
But I don't think it will disturb their tour because generally they never come, in that area. Yeah.
They come, they look at our house.
No,
They
no, I
criticize
know,
our
but-
shutters, but the
But they
general
don't
look.
come into where there are vines, and it will be an opportunity to expand the tour to the garden flower.
Yeah. So, Dana, are you done with your questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure that this is a complete presentation. It's an idea. So let me give you a little bit of pushback. On the face of it, this is great. Wildflower meadows are a big deal for all the reasons you said. But so are those trees. Those trees you have there, right after those trees is basically a straight down drop to the train tracks. Basically, you got the trees, then you got sort of a cliff, the way it is in a lot of the river towns. Yeah, I live there. I'm very familiar with that plot. You walk 2 feet and there is a drop down to the tracks. That's basically what's there. People don't walk around beyond that border. Those trees, while blocking the view, are actually essential to prevent what used to happen, which is a lot of mud accumulating in that area and sliding down. So it's basically the end of the property, and then it goes down to Metro North. I get the part of putting a meadow there. I would not be supportive of cutting back or cutting down any trees that are already there.
We don't.
No, I understand. I heard what you guys,
Yeah.
I heard what you guys said, yeah. So a meadow sounds nice instead of invasive plants that are there. What's not clear to me is exactly what you guys are doing. If the idea is to do, a little sitting area and all of that you're paying for, which is what I thought the presentation was going to be, that would be interesting. But what I actually heard you say is that's a phase 2 and we haven't figured that out yet. So I don't know. I don't want to trade McDonald's for Burger King. That is not in the public interest. A meadow versus plants that people don't really walk there. People don't sit there now, and they won't sit there if there's a meadow. You can't actually sit in meadows. You're not supposed to. If you have too many humans walking around, it defeats a lot of the meadow concept, actually. Central Park has meadows because it's an urban park. It's a huge urban park. And if you look at the residents' capacity versus land and trees, there are many more people and much more concrete than trees and land. Not actually the case in Ossining. It's not, the whole point of this has to be for the public good and how it increases the public good. Otherwise, why bother? If you're paying to have a trail, a little, and it's a small area, actually. I mean, it's not a park. It's, Sparta is like it's a nice sized park. It doesn't get used as much as many of the other parks. I think there are a lot of people living in Ossining don't even know it's there. It's covered by a lot of trees. You sit there, the trees have stuff falling on you as you sit at the tables. It's got a lot of trees. You could argue that maybe some of the branches should be cut back a bit, but most people will tell you leaving nature to its own device is actually what most environmentalists want. So I'm not clear about the public good here because we're not short on wildlife. Those trees that are there are already environmentally friendly. You're replacing one type of environmentally friendly environment for another. Birds use weeping willows. They're also good for pollinators. All those things that are there. The invasive plants, it's the property of the village. Frankly, the village manager should send somebody there once in 5 years and have, those things taken up and cut back if there's time to do that. So I need to understand the additive public good by doing this, because I'm not really hearing it. The phase 2 part, the nice, little trail, maybe people can sit on a bench and all of that. Lovely idea. That's a benefit that today doesn't exist. But short of that, I'm not hearing the overall the better public good than exists by simply leaving things alone, with sometimes leaving green space and trees and bushes alone. There are a decreasing number of weeping willows because they've been taken down, and they're actually good trees to have, just FYI. And you can't cut weeping willows back, by the way, because you destroy them. So there's reasons for that.
We love that weeping willow.
No, I know. I'm sure you do. And I'm not suggesting you are saying that. I'm simply saying that I'm not hearing the added value to what exists there today by having a meadow versus letting nature simply exist the way nature exists. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes.
Mayor, maybe, excuse me, Dr. Wood, maybe I just want to reframe a bit. The conversation we had, one of the issues there is the vines are invasive. And the vines ultimately, if you don't keep cutting them back, do put the trees at risk. So the immediate benefit of getting rid of the vines, and whether it's a meadow or more native plants, would help the village, because right now the vines are a big challenge all over Westchester, as we know. So there's sort of an immediate benefit to look at, and I think I defer to Dr. Wood and his wife that a meadow, but I think what we're really looking at is more native plants, less invasive species, leave the trees as they are. And then as time evolves, it's not really a space that's utilized anywhere. It's really to make sure getting rid of the vines, we can keep pulling them, but unless we sort of fill in with native plants, they're going to keep coming back. So that was really sort of the basis of the initial conversation. Pathways and things like that wasn't really part of the initial conversation that we had.
So Dr. Woods, and I'm sorry, your name is not up there, and I actually
Katia, call me Katia.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. You would like to pull out the vines on your dime, not the village, and then plant a native or a meadow there as the next thing. And you would donate your time and efforts or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and plants. Yeah.
And plants. Okay, Stuart, issues?
I'm sorry, I just have.
Oh, I'm
Thank you.
sorry, Manny, but
Okay.
I want to ask Stuart if there's actually legal issues with this, and then we'll move to
Okay.
more questions.
Well, there are questions, Mayor, with regard to maintenance. There are
Right.
questions with regard to Metro North's involvement and whether they have any concerns. We have to deal with BPW because there were issues when when Dr. Wood and his wife initially started building their own home. As some members of the board may recall, there was some clear cutting that occurred on the village-owned property, which
Yep.
did cause some runoff issues. So
Yes.
there are things that need to come into consideration. If in terms of having someone having planting, that's fine. There is a question, as I said, with regard to maintenance as to over time, obviously, in terms of this becomes an area where things have to be done. So I just think that there are questions to be answered. Let me put it to you that way. And I don't minimize the Metro North role here, because as mayor, you pointed out, we are butt up against the tracks here.
But
And
it is not their property. It's next to them, right?
you are correct. But when we are dealing with something that's near their property, and we have had this situation down
Yeah.
near where, Hidden Cove is to be built in that whole location, they get very much involved as to what comes within that location. So all of this are areas to come into. Maintenance is obviously one of my big concern, and other things like that. So that's
Okay.
where we are.
All right, so we'll let Deputy Mayor ask. So, yeah, because by the way, I totally understand that these are good intentions. I get it 100%. Otherwise, the village manager would not even have asked you to come and present in front of the board. She's already done the vetting. She understands that this passes like a certain level of great intentions and wanting to make the place better for everybody, prettier, better, get rid of the vines that are killing a lot of the trees in Westchester, as the village manager said. We get that, but we're also aware that sometimes the good intentions also, if they're not managed from day one correctly, lead to other issues. Manny, you wanted to ask some questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Dr. Woods, and yet, thank you very much. This is, I think, is a concept that I think was said before, is that I love the idea. I think, bringing things like that in front of us, it will helps the community. I use the Sparrow Park all the time with my daughter. We go down there. She loves that area. I guess I want to ask something similar to what the mayor asked in relationship to this particular lot to Stuart. And then I want to ask a couple of the questions to Karen. I wish sometimes Bill would have been part of this conversation as well, because he's part of the parks portion. So, Stuart, this is just another village-owned lot.
Correct.
For me, and my poor interpretation of this, because we do want to do something to this, and at some point of time, whatever the outcome may be, I would treat it as another park. So the question that I have is, whatever we do, however we want to do this, I would like to ask Stuart and the board if we were consider this lot to make it a parkland as part of the whole intent of the parks. So, then at some point of time, we can do however we want to do this, do some willows, do some seating area, do anything. But to me, it's like, if this is just another municipal parkland, to me means nothing, because it's not part of the park areas within the village. So what do we need to do to make this a parkland itself? That's question one to Stuart. If you don't have the answer, that's okay.
You can, what they call it formally is, it's called, you alienate the property. You basically declare it that it is a park. Now, you can make it a park by just how you act over the location, trails and things like that, although it's not that large to do that. But you are correct, Deputy Mayor, that until it's considered to be a park, either through resolution or whatever way, it is simply a village lot. like any other village lot, and the village would be free to do whatever it wanted to do with that village lot.
So my question will be to the board, whatever we decide to do with this lot, would the majority of the board be willing to designate this land as a parkland? That's the question that I have for you guys. The other question that I have is for Karen. So when you guys looked into this particular property, we do have an arborist that we can consult on nature. Was that part of the walk? You know, what was his recommendations? We have a report in writing that we could, have that as part of the records as well.
So when we looked at this, we really looked at it as similar to things that Green Ossing does in Crawbucky and other things that we have volunteer groups, is a really way to get on top of invasive vines in areas that are not necessarily well-traveled, but still part of our green space and parkland. So we certainly would consult with our arborist, but when Bill and I met with Dr. Wood, we really just discussed a way to, again, facilitate more native plantings that would be better for the environment than the invasive vines. The invasive vines there are problematic. And they're an endless chore for our Parks Department. And again, the way that you sort of remediate these things is the more native species you plant, the less invasive species over time. So that's really where I'm getting a feedback here, but that's where we netted out, and this was a preliminary discussion. And if we, the board decides they want to go forward, I think that there's a lot of things that we can do with the resources that we have in the village with the Parks Department. Certainly our Parks Department is getting much better educated on the planting of trees and native species and going green throughout all of our parks. So again, another initiative to just really help maintain what we have and make sure that we're doing the best that we can to mitigate the damage that we have from invasive species.
Yeah, thank you. So again, the question is still on the floor, and I would love to, if you guys, the board wants to take their time to think about this, but for me, it will be important to have the designation as a parkland for this particular lot, and then I love the idea, and I would like to see a little bit of a move forward with this concept and see what that means exactly. And if we don't do anything at the end of the day, we don't do anything. But the designation of the parkland, I think, is needed for something like this, just for the future of that lot.
Right. So to recap for the board members that were not around, here are the three options. You do nothing, and that leaves it the way it is. You sell the lot to a builder. A house can be built on there. That was a discussion a few years ago. That lot is a lot. Some would argue that the responsibility here is actually to put it up for sale because it is, it's not a park. It's no different than any other lot. And with the river, with $1 Million River view that piece of land has, the village should sell it and get taxes on it, which it doesn't do currently. And the third option is to treat it as a park, even if you don't declare it a park, or declare it a park for now and forever. And then it becomes a park, and then you design the park. And we have community members who are willing to spend their time. And I mean, it butts up against their property. It's in front of their property, actually. It's between them and the Hudson. And to do something with it, all of which is a discussion of what's best for the public good. That's where we left it off a number of years ago, actually. And it all started a conversation based, I think, on Dr. Wood knocking down our trees. Unknowingly, I think. I don't think you knew that. I think people, I think you were clearing out what looked like a mound of stuff and made it look nice. And in that process, you found out that they don't belong to you, and you can't just go on somebody else's property, in this case, the village. And that actually brought this whole thing to light. But that's where we landed, just so the other board members who were not around, is what to do with the lot. And I think the deputy mayor is sort of bringing it back and saying, look, the decision to do nothing is also a decision to do something. I always say that doing nothing is an actual proactive decision. You leave nature alone, and whatever you clean up, whatever needs to be cleaned up. The birds are happy, everybody's happy, It is what it is. If you build a meadow, people can't just run around in there either. This is, and that's also what happens in Central Park. You're not supposed to run in those meadows, because if you do, you ruin them. You're not supposed to walk your dogs in those meadows, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the board has to decide what to do with that lot. What's best in public good. I personally think we live in a very densely populated village, and an opportunity to add things that are environmentally friendly and better, or is a better use of a small, tiny little spot like that than any other doing anything else with it. But I think we do have to, number one, decide, and number two, then see what Dr. Wood and his wife would like to do, and if that makes sense for us. But the only thing I heard is that you are tearing out the vines on your own dime, and then having someone look at it, and then planting native, a meadow. That's what I heard was the proposal. The rest of the stuff is not actually what you're proposing at all. You're simply saying that could come later on. I just want to be clear on what you're proposing.
Sure. About the tearing out, yes, that area in the middle that's overrun by vines. The first cut would be to plant wildflower seeds, of native wildflowers.
Right.
Probably 2 or 3 cuts above, the Scots variety, probably from some nursery that, grows wildflowers and harvests the seeds from them, that sort of thing.
Right, you would work with our arborist, was the comment made, as long as that land belongs to the
No
village,
doubt.
somebody from the village, and you would want to, because she has expertise. You will learn that she'll tell you exactly, she might even have some suggestions you haven't thought of. So I think that's really cool.
And it's the village land.
Or you could buy the land and then it can be yours. So those are all options if the village wants to sell it. So these are the options that are out there. I'm not sure we're going to decide all that now on this call, but we appreciate you bringing forward your idea, because that is a lovely area. I don't know, Stuart and I are going to have to discuss a little bit about Metro North, because I'm not sure how involved they are or not, but we'll see about that. If we build on it, that's one thing. If we don't touch very much and simply take out vines and put in different flowers, I don't know how involved they need to be. Which is what the village is doing anyway, is ripping out vines. So there's no difference. So we're going to leave that there with all those options for consideration by the board. And we will discuss. I just want to make sure that we're very clear about what you're proposing. That is really the only
Sure.
reason I'm doing this recap, so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I think that's all right. Just for your information, like the area, between the Willow and the river is rather vacant now, and the train, that's what I mean. So, and it's the village land. I thought we might not even do anything there, because I assume Metro North wants to be able to get in there a lot, but that's up to Metro North. But I was thinking we'd go right up to the fence.
Yeah, that's what I would think, because after that, it's pretty much a cliff and a driving area for them to go in. That's why it looks the way it does. That's actually the whole point. If you look from the other, if you go there, if people go there, you're right, the map doesn't do any justice to topography. Scarborough Manor is on this big hill, there's bushes, Sing Sing's down the way. We all live in this community, so we're familiar. The maps don't do the topography justice, so I appreciate you pointing that out. Okay, village manager, anything else? So we will get back to you with something, is the point of, I just wanted to be clear about what you're offering the village.
Thanks for entertaining the.
No, thank you for your intentions and ideas.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So thank you so much. We will be following up, Jeremy and Katja, I'll follow up with you following this, and then we'll do our due diligence with Metro North and everything else, and then we can determine next steps after discussion with the board. So thank you so much for your time and your interest.
So we should.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the exciting meeting. I offer that to everyone. Most people do not take me up on it, but I nevertheless do offer that.
Thank you.
That opportunity.
Well, we do have an exciting next agenda
Thank
item too. Thank you very much. So next up is the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. And this is a draft report review. As some of you may remember, a grant, we had acquired a grant to do a study on our watershed for the Indian Brook Reservoir. And we worked with our counterparts in the town and in Newcastle and Portland on this as well. Andy Teese has been overseeing this from a staff perspective, also working with Remy Martinez, who is out on vacation this week, as well as colleagues from the different communities and stakeholders that we have, volunteers, Pat Yost and others, members of the community who have been involved in looking at how we can make sure that we're protecting our drinking water and our watershed. It's been a long time, I think, since the board's gotten a comprehensive update. And tonight we have Liz Moran, Dr. Liz Moran from Ecologic to present the draft presentation.
Welcome. And are we sharing some sort of, is it just Dr. Moran speaking or others in this presentation?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Liz Moran. I'm from Ecologic. We are part of the technical provider team that has been working with Andy and many of the colleagues. Thank you, Karen, for that kind of background on the program. But my colleague Lisa Rickmers and I are going to share a presentation tonight. Lisa is from the engineering firm of H2M, and we are all part of the Barton and LaJudas team. So lots of organizations, as I said. But Andy, do you want to kick anything off?
Yeah, just let me apologize for missing Lisa too. I apologize, Lisa. We have valuable resources.
I thought I gave you a little like a softball over there when I said if Dr. Moran is the only one, but nobody picked up on it. It's okay.
I heard it.
Good evening, board and mayor.
Hello, Andy.
Everybody, this is a long time coming. Karen did a nice introduction there, and this was a good venture between us and Newcastle and Cortland and planners and river keepers and local people. I mean, it was like a lot of input. The overall goal is to protect our watershed. Obviously, we know we have two water sources and we have control of our own watershed, but our watershed encompasses 3 separate towns. So for everybody to be on the same page is so important. I'm just happy that we have a plan and it's going to be a working document at the end. So it's not just going to be something that's on the shelf. It's something that if we test the water and we see something that's abnormal, we have a way to trace it back to see where that source is, where there might be an illicit discharge, what enforcement we have, and then what type of cooperation do we have with other towns. So there are 3 consultants that worked on this, Barton LaJudas, H2M, and then Ecologic, which is Liz Moran's firm, and it was just well done. So let's get started.
All right, thanks. I'm going to share my screen then. I have permission. Okay. Screen 1, share. Okay, do you all see that? So again, thank you for letting us hop onto your work session tonight. We have the draft report ready for your review and comment. And we are looking forward to moving this through the process. So between me and Lisa, we have a quick agenda to go through. We're going to explain how we did things, and we're going to talk about the framework. DWSP2 stands for Drinking Water Source Protection Program. This is a program of multiple New York State agencies to guide municipalities and water providers through a fairly structured process that has a lot of community engagement and involvement to ultimately figure out what are the best long-term protection methods for their drinking water source. So we'll explain kind of what we did, and then we will focus on what did we find, what is important for the Indian Brook Reservoir, what does this mean, what are the implications, and from that will flow what are recommended actions. So the plan has a series of recommendations and kind of details on implementation strategies and next steps. And then who takes leadership, who are the partners, how do we ensure that this plan that is really reflects a year's worth of detailed investigation and a lot of conversation, how do we make sure that this is a living document, as Andy said, and doesn't just sit on the shelf? So that's what we're talking about tonight. Just some real quick background on the public drinking water supply. And Andy, again, jump in anytime. There's about 32,000 customers between the town and the village of Ossining. The primary water source for the town and village is from the Croton Aqueduct, but the village is fortunate to have, there's this supplemental source of the Indian Brook Reservoir. And that's really the focus of the protection methods. New York City DEP is all over what methods need to be done to protect the Croton system. So the focus on our DWSP2 is really on that Indian Brook Reservoir. And the watershed area of that encompasses over 1,300 acres. So this isn't the first step at trying to identify and manage the water supply system. The dam that created the reservoir was constructed back in the late 1800s. So it's been a water supply for a while. The water filtration plant was built in 1930, one of the earliest in New York State, as Andy has looked up for us. Across the state, New York State Department of Health has a system of watershed rules and regulations in place. Because they were developed in the early part of the 20th century, they really addressed issues at that point. So things like livestock carcasses and how close can your privy be to the reservoir and such. So but in addition to kind of those sources, they also empowered communities to inspect what's going on in the watershed. If they see any sources of contamination, they're to report that and then work through the state health department for that. So in 1930, the filtration plant, as I said, that was expanded in 1985, and the system, the town and village, interconnected with New York City's Croton Aqueduct. So the water from the Croton system is treated at the Ossining system. Raw water flows from both the aqueduct and from the Indian River Reservoir. They are treated and then distributed. In the early 2000s, New York State Department of Health made another kind of round of assessments across the state looking at drinking water supplies and came up, this was called the Source Water Assessment Program. So this program looked at specific watershed areas, or in the case of groundwater systems, aquifer recharge areas, and evaluated them for potential contaminants. So it was just an assessment of potential contaminants. There weren't any kind of implementation steps or management methods or recommendations or follow-up that are part of the source water assessment plan, the SWAP plans. They were also not, they didn't have a lot of local input at that point. The plans were done essentially by the New York State Health Department with assistance of kind of regional planning entities. So for this system, key issues were identified as phosphorus, this issue of potential harmful algal blooms and eutrophication of the reservoir, microbial contamination, and other chemicals. Those were kind of laid out as, okay, around 2002, this is what was considered threats. So this was really good information. It helped inform kind of continued efforts and upgrades to the filtration plant. Then, of course, we had the updated comprehensive plan in place in 2018. And so, with an updated comprehensive plan, you have opportunity for kind of land use controls and zoning and some other kind of management methods. And then in 2022 here's where we are now, and we are re-looking at this framework for long-term protection from a much more community-driven perspective. Here's a location map. There's some points on this that we're going to talk about and kind of refer to. This, of course, is the Indian Brook Reservoir. This green star is the intake. So the intake is at the dam. And
I'd like to add one thing, if you don't mind.
Sure, Andy, go ahead.
So speaking of intakes that you're talking about, and you're just talking about upgrades that we've accomplished, a little under $6 million was spent about 5 years ago. We rebuilt the spillway, right, for the Indian Brook Reservoir, which most people are aware of on the board. And we put in new intakes. The intakes gave us the ability, they were back from the 1800s, the original intakes, that we could draw water from different levels and we could take the water quality that's the best. So that was a huge investment for the village. And at that time, we had to decide, do we want to keep using this water? What's the advantage? Do we really want to put that kind of money into it? And just on a money side, New York City charges you based on per capita usage. So if an average resident uses 100 gallons a day, and you go above that as a community that you're buying water from New York City, you can pay up to 3 times the rate. Our reservoir keeps us from having to get into those excess charges, on top of it's the right way that we should be using the water. Just wanted to bring that up.
That's a really good point. So investing in this kind of source water protection is another way to ensure that you have that redundancy, the interconnection, and some local control over, what the water rates are and all. So yeah, thanks, Andy. So on this map, there's some points here that I want to highlight. So we have the town. These are town boundaries. So we have Ossining. This is the village boundary down here. It's kind of hidden by the legend. Newcastle, and then Cortland up here. So we talked about, that the stakeholder group included representatives of our neighboring municipalities. And that's really important because any land use decisions, of course, that go on within this red area. This red area is the watershed. So this is the land area where rain and snowmelt and everything else flows eventually into the reservoir. So what happens on this landscape has the potential to affect water quality. So that's the intermunicipal component of this. I wanted to point that out on this map. And this zeroes in a little bit. Here's that red line, that's the entire watershed again. Here's the intake. This yellow circle around the intake is called the control and monitoring area. This is where the village has a lot of control over what happens within this zone, because any potential source of contaminant could potentially reach that intake in very short order. Now, this purple line here is called the critical area. And that is, again, based on the potential time of travel for any source of contaminant to reach the reservoir and potentially affect the drinking water quality. So as you review the report, you're going to see that there are separate kind of recommendations and strategies proposed for the source water area, which is the whole watershed, and then this critical area. been talking about the framework. So New York State, DEC, Department of Health, the Ag and Markets, other agencies came together to say, okay, the swap plans were done, but we're not seeing a lot of implementation. What can we do to create a framework that any municipality, no matter what is their source of water, if it's a surface water, if it's groundwater, if it's combined, if it's springs, what is a process that these water providers and municipalities can go through to come up with adequate protective and management methods? So what is the information they need to have? Who needs to be at the table? What is the kind of this step through process? And that was released in the end of 2019. DEC put out a solicitation for municipalities to field test the framework, and Ossining was applied and was successful in getting this funding for the technical service providers to work with Ossining. So this working draft is actually on track, hopefully, to turn into a final draft. And as we've been working through the framework with Ossining and other municipalities over the past year, we've been giving some feedback to the agencies about, well, this works, this doesn't work, this needs some clarification. So they're taking all of the learning from all of these various municipalities and coming up with a final draft, which will then be made available to many, many more municipalities across the state. So I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to Lisa, who's going to walk us through the framework and the major findings.
Thank you, Liz. So the framework that the state provides has 4 phases. The framework guides each participating municipality through a process to create their own unique protection program that's tailored to their specific community. It's broken up into 4 phases and 8 key components, as you can see here. All this information is available on their website. And the next several slides will take a closer look at each of these 4 phases as they apply to the village of Ossining. The very first phase of the framework is to form a stakeholder group. Since this program is a community-driven program, we want to ensure that the community was involved and that there was buy-in from the village of Ossining as we developed the protection plan and strategies for implementation. The stakeholder group met on a regular basis with the technical assistance team as we progressed through the framework phases and components. And at this point have met for almost a year on a regular basis. As a key contributor, the stakeholder committee explored the various alternatives and provided local expertise to the consultant team. It was such a critical pairing, having experts in water quality and how to delineate a watershed combined with locals who were able to tell about the specific problems that the village of Ossining has faced and encountered in their source water area.
Next. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The first step of the stakeholder group was really to define a vision and establish goals for what they were aiming to achieve with this this program. The key to Ossining's vision was that a high-quality water supply is built on a foundation of intermunicipal collaboration in the areas of monitoring the supply, identifying issues, and enforcing protection measures. We can, new slide. This map provides a.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are you implying that each of the stakeholders created a different vision?
No,
you said the vision for Ossining, and then you read it. Does that mean that the others had different visions?
Every community and every stakeholder group. So we've worked with multiple communities through this process. And each community, their stakeholder group worked to identify what their goals for their water supply was.
Right, so this is the stakeholder group,
Yes.
which includes the other municipalities. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and Mayor, it was basically the planners of the other 3 towns.
Right, so the people who are doing this are all people who are planners or engineers, et cetera, right?
Correct.
And you had Riverkeeper on there too, with somebody
Yes.
representing them. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
This is a map that shows the land uses within the source water area. Again, there's both that red line, which shows the whole source water area, and the purple line showing the critical area where the water returns to the reservoir at a much quicker rate. You can see that that bright yellow is residential use, which is the predominant use across the source water and critical areas. The green area around the reservoir is public services, which so that immediate area surrounding the reservoir is controlled and protected. But it's important to note that that all this residential use, because I think it informs the protection and management methods later. Next slide. This shows a map of the potential contaminant sources that were identified. There were 28 potential contaminant sources that were noted in the source water area. Of those, 26 were actually closed spills. In the critical area, there were 9 identified sources, and 4 of those, which you see on the map, are closed spills. The 5 that are not shown on the map aren't shown because they encompass large areas, and there are things such as failing septic systems, lawn and garden chemicals, waterfront properties, and MS4 communities. Later in the presentation, I'll identify the protection and management methods and how they address some of these concerns surrounding the potential contaminant sources. Next slide. So flowing from this definition of the watershed and understanding of what the potential contaminant sources were, the technical team and the stakeholder group identified and ranked the priority issues for the Village of Ossining and their protection plan. The first priority issue identified was source water monitoring. Sampling the source water before it gets to the treatment plant can help reduce the need for additional treatment processes. It's recognized that there's a need for enhanced monitoring of unregulated and emerging contaminants. And the information provided by this monitoring is vital for prevention of future or current contamination of the water source. A second identified issue as a priority was to coordinate with the NYC DEP for operational quality needs. While the report itself really focuses on the Indian Brook Reservoir, it's important to note that Ossining receives 2/3 of its raw water supply from the Croton Aqueduct system, water that's then mixed with water from the Indian Brook Reservoir and treated. So the water system is significant to the village. By formalizing agreements with the NYC DEP regarding monitoring, sampling, and current source water quality events, this will allow the village to work with the New York City DEP to ensure the future quality of the water supply.
Let me just jump in real quick, give an example. Everybody's aware of the MIB issues we had a couple of years ago. We rectified that situation fast with the powder activated carbon system that we designed and put in service within a couple of months, which was a big deal. New York City was only testing for MIB like once a year until they started to have issues at the biggest water treatment plant down in the Bronx that went online about 10 years ago. Once we called and said we're having issues, they started to sample more, but they didn't get the results back as fast. We went to sampling every week. They were kind of able to narrow down the issue of the MIB and where it was in their reservoir based on our information, because our information was more real time. So since that event, the communication is really open between us and New York City, and that's kind of unheard of. So we're on the right track with that.
It's great. It's very helpful to have these concrete examples. The third priority issue is intermunicipal cooperation and coordination of enforcement. I think it's pretty clear to see when we look at those source water maps and see the source water area, why the need for intermunicipal cooperation and collaboration is so essential. The watershed crosses municipal boundaries. Currently, there are strong partnerships for coordinated emergency response, and the goal is to enhance this watershed-wide coordinated approach for implementing and enforcing measures of protection. A fourth priority is intermunicipal land use planning. The goal here is to reduce discharges from residential and commercial uses through strategies such as zoning and land use acquisition in the most critical areas. A fifth priority is enhanced management of regulated potential contaminant sources. There are regulated contaminant sources such as fuel storage tanks and bulk chemical storage that where there's a need for monitoring and inspection programs to reduce the risk of leaks and spills and prevent spills from entering the watershed. And a final but very important priority issue is outreach and education. Oftentimes, homeowners are unaware of their impact on the watershed. Education on things such as failing septic systems and septic system maintenance, home and garden chemicals and how they impact the water supply, can improve water quality and also empower home and business owners to protect their own water supply. The final step in the report was to designate a plan management team. As was mentioned before, the goal of this document is to be a living document. And while the report itself identifies the watershed, the source water area, the critical area, potential contaminant sources, priority issues, and management methods, it's the plan management team that will be responsible for ensuring the protection plan is completed and carried through and implemented. In addition to implementation, the plan management team should keep the community and all parties involved and up to date on the progression of the plan by sharing the plan and subsequent progress reports. And the plan itself should be updated every 5 years to reflect the changes and evolution in the needs of the system, the land uses surrounding it, and also the evolution of regulations around things such as emerging contaminants. Sorry, I was just going to end by saying on this slide by saying that the state has indicated that they are intending to provide technical support in this phase of the program as well, and have brought on, I believe, 4 new staff members at their offices and are likely to continue technical team support for plan management teams.
Great. So if I may, I get most of these team members. What is the Town of Austin City Hall? Who is that?
Oh, I think that's a placeholder for, some, not City Hall, but an elected official perhaps from, or appointed or manager from the town.
You have a Town of Austin Planning Board Chair. Not quite sure what that is. I think that there's even here a confusion between the town and the village, so not quite sure what that is. I don't think it's a placeholder. I think that's just a misnomer, and somebody should just look into that. The Environmental Advisory Council, Andy, don't forget, the town has an advisory council, so does the village. There's 2 of them. So I don't know if both of them are involved, or obviously the village is 5 times the size of the town, but in this case, not so much so. Like there's a real overlap. But just to be clear who this management team is, it needs to be set up, I think, correctly.
Yes, I will say that this is a general overview of the areas of government and organization that the members are pulled from. The report itself does identify specific people who are to be part of invited to be part of the initial plan management team. But as those people and their roles may change, this is a broad overview of the types of organizations and parts of government that will be involved in the process.
Got it. And so this is a plan and suggest every 5 years. So the suggestion is to revise the plan every 5 years. The comp plans are recommended to be done every 10 years, but this should be done every 5 years. Is that what's being said here?
That is the state agency's recommendation, Mayor.
Okay,
It's true
interesting.
that, comp plans tend to have a longer cycle than that.
Well, most places don't even do them every 10
Don't even-
years. They're
Okay.
expensive, cumbersome, and take people offline from their jobs. So I would not even say the majority of community municipalities in the state of New York have done a every 10-year plan. We actually have the last 2, but 5 years is even more plan, even more of them. So, okay, if that's suggested, I'm just curious, that's fine.
I
don't
think
have an
that
opinion about it one way or the other. It just seems not a long time between plans.
no, I agree, especially since this one took a year. But that
And
said,
you're not done yet.
yeah, that said, I don't think it's at the same level of involvement of a comprehensive
Okay.
plan, and it may, now granted, the changes could be vast, in which case the updates could be vast, but certain things like emerging contaminant sources, which we expect new regulations to be coming down the pipeline for very shortly, that might change some of the key recommendations in this within the 5-year timeline, and those types of things could be captured with an update.
And Mayor, one thing I wanted to say, right, or a couple of things. This plan is, this grant obviously was to the village of Ossining, and the village decides who is part of this management team, right? So it's our
Okay.
decision. Okay, that's a big point here. Because
That
we
is a
want
big
to-
point.
Yep.
But I mean, you want to collaborate though.
Yes,
Of
but
course, as always.
I also don't want to waste people's time that shouldn't be involved. The other thing is, you talk about the plan 5 years. We're going to have so much information to add to that plan because of the EPA regulations, harmful algae blooms, different water quality standards. That is going to be added to this, and that will help us narrow down to where we see issues. So
Okay.
it's
So you're
it's
thinking
important.
5 years because of so many things coming down the pike actually makes sense.
Yes, just like we're going to talk later about lead and coppers and how that has drastically changed. This is
Okay.
the same thing on the raw water side.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, so let me just wrap this up a little bit with next steps. These the village board hopefully will adopt this plan once you've had a chance to review it, give us your comments. Once a plan is adopted, the benefit is it opens up eligibility for additional state funding in various programs. So that's kind of the carrot to move this all the way through the process. Once a plan is adopted, then the thought is to convene this, finalize and bring together the plan management team and start to figure out what is their essential work plan. Like, what are you going to do first? Who's going to take the lead? What are the lines of communication? And the state agencies have, as Lisa referenced, the state agencies are extending the contracts with the technical service providers for an additional 6 months after plan adoption in order to ensure that this transition goes smoothly. And it also gives us a chance to make sure that all of the information and maps and data and spreadsheets that have been generated over the past year make their way into the appropriate files at the village so that they can continue that. And then ongoing, again, as Lisa mentioned, Department of Health has created 4 new positions statewide, and those staff members are dedicated to assisting municipalities with their DWSP2. So yes, it's a lot of responsibility, but there are resources to be had. And then again, this theme that we just talked about in response to the mayor's question, adaptive management, things are changing. Regulations are changing, emerging contaminants are changing. We've talked about that. Land use and development patterns, invasive species, harmful algal blooms we've talked about, and underlying a lot of these potential impacts are this, changing climate that we are seeing, where we have prolonged periods of drought interspersed with, intense rainstorms. And as the reservoir waters warm, then you're at a higher risk for harmful algal blooms. Fortunately, with the investments you've made in the multi-level intake, you can try to avoid some of these water quality issues by, drawing from different depths within the reservoir. But, there's a lot of moving parts here, and this whole theme of adaptive management is really underlying a lot of the work that we have been doing. So that was the last slide. I want to thank you all for your attention, and see if we have any additional questions. I can stop sharing. Okay. There we go.
Comments, or thank you so much. Super informative, educational, learned a lot. So thank you for that. Thank you, Andy, as well, for bringing this forth. And folks on the board, questions, comments? Okay.
No immediate questions for me, but gratitude for presenting a lot of really solid information. And one thing that Andy keeps us on our toes about is the importance of water quality. We have the benefit of having close sources of water, and being able to protect them and move thoughtfully. It makes a lot of sense. So thank you for presenting, and onward.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. So village, are there any other questions? I didn't see any.
I do.
Oh, I didn't
Thank
realize.
you.
Okay.
That's
Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I do want to say thank you to Andy and obviously Paul. I'm sure this the involvement in the presentation to both Lisa and Liz. I appreciate that information in regards to that. We care a lot about the water and the facilities of what we have. So I guess I have a little bit more of price tag on this. Every 5 years, usually, this time, as part of the state, I'm assuming 5 years from now will be the cost of the village. And how much will that looks like for us? Do you have an idea on what this cost will be?
And who's paying? And I think he's also asking who's paying for the costs.
Yeah, the plan management, the plan itself has some cost estimates for some of the recommendations. And they're kind of built out on staff time. So the assumption is that among all of the agencies and participants that, a lot of that will be done by current staff rather than by consultants. So as this plan management team works together, maybe they meet quarterly or something, to just keep updated on what's going on, communicate about new regulations. You'll have the DPW and the water superintendent and other experts at the table.
Okay. All right. Obviously is staff time, time, I guess that's what
time,
so
yeah.
the village will be.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So Andy, and I guess Paul, what does this mean for us in the potential water plant itself? Does it have any tied backs into what we are trying to accomplish there at some point of time, maybe?
It's just going to provide better water quality, better understanding of what we need to treat for the new water plant. The new water plant design can handle anything that we're throwing at it in what we currently have. It's like, like I mentioned, the contaminants and what's required to be tested is becoming more stringent every day. And we talk about PFOAs, fire retardants, like the situation that happened in Newburgh with Stewart Airport, where they used the fire retardants on the runways and the planes and the de-icers, and it made its way into the water system. It's like, it's really understanding where we might have a problem that feeds our watershed. You know, this is such a different system in New York City, the Croton system, and our own system kind of mimics New York City's system, the Croton system. They're so close to each other. You know, New York City has 3 different sources. They have the Catskill system, the Ashokan Reservoir, they have the Delaware system, and they have this Croton system. Those 2 other systems, the population it's not as populated. And New York City, you know, in the last 50 years, just purchased more property, and that's how they controlled it. The Croton system and then our own Indian Brook Reservoir, we can't purchase the property. You know, it would cost a fortune, and there's residential neighborhoods there. So getting back to the plant, it doesn't affect the plant at all. In fact, the new plant is there to handle MIB and more of like the Croton water issues. We didn't have MIB in our Indian Brook Reservoir. And that's why we don't mix the water. We could take some of that water from Croton and fill up our reservoir, but then we contaminate our reservoir with potential, you know, issues. So it's a pretty clean source. There's times when our reservoir blows away the Croton system as far as raw water quality, but there's also times when the reservoir flips over, or we have HABs, which were harmful algae blooms that the state, you know, they push this. This is a DEC grant. They're trying to get a handle on what is harmful and what's not harmful. So like when we had a little bit of algae on our water last year, they told us, don't use your water, go directly off New York City, let's test it. Well, we tested it and it wasn't harmful algae blooms, but they're being very conservative. So we're part of like them developing this baseline. And that's what's, you know, we were one of the few communities that got this grant. And I think it's gonna be used all over the place.
All right, so I'm gonna hold you to that anything that we find in here will not affect the change or modifications on our water plant. Because last time when we did, it cost us a lot of design and the delayed and obviously more money.
Yes, and that was New York City's water that affected that.
I'm going to hold you to that statement.
Oh,
that it says whatever we find is not going to affect the design or the implementation of that. So just want to make sure that stays on the record. But I don't have any other questions right now. So thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Manny. Okay, folks, unless I see somebody tell me they have more questions or comments. Thank you, Dr. Moran. Thank you, Ms. Reichmers. Is that right? Or Rickmers?
Rickmers.
Rickmers.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
Too.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, in a similar vein, we are going to be talking about a lead service line replacement grant. And a few weeks ago, Andy, Paul, and I met with members of, and Stuart met with members of Arcadis to talk about a grant opportunity that will provide up to $2.5 million to assist us with lead service line replacement, which is something that we will be mandated to do. We've already been doing this, making very, very steady progress on this, but we still have a ways to go. This grant would offset what is it's a $2.5 million grant on what we expect would be a $4 million job. We are asking the board to vote on a resolution that would allow us to submit a grant that's due on August 31st so that we can compete for this money. The grant would be done by Arcadis. This is a technical grant that would involve also baseline work that we're going to need for a report that's going to be due to the Department of Health in 2024. And with that, I will turn it over to Andy and Paul to provide more detail.
Okay, thanks. So,
hey, Andy,
yeah.
Before you start, can I just add this one thing? And I'm sorry if you said this because I cut out for a second when I was switching back to my laptop versus my phone. Lead contamination has been in all the papers for the last couple of years. It's prevalent in a lot of the school districts because of the the stagnant water that exists in a lot of the schools, and it's prevalent in a lot of older communities because that's how they used to make the connections to the mains. It's important for the public to know that the distribution system is tested system-wide on a regular basis for lead contamination. So although we have lead service connections and what Andy's going to talk about, we don't have a public health emergency right now. It's monitored routinely, and the water is very safe to drink. I meant to talk about that earlier, Andy, about prefacing this whole presentation with that, because we don't want to create an air of concern when it's not there.
Okay.
Thank
So
you. Sorry.
that's a good point. So the regulations are getting very strict on lead and copper, especially after what happened in Flint, Michigan, right? Bad decisions. They brought in aggressive water. They tried to save money on their source water, and basically a lot of people got sick. We test our water constantly to make sure that it's not aggressive. We look at the Langler index. There's all different things we look at to make sure we put the best quality water through the filtration plant and it goes out to the system. Now, there's a certain amount of tests that are required in the distribution system, and out of our 6,200 service connections, we know there's 198 service connections or 196 service connections on our side. Our side means between the valve and our water main. That's what the village owns. The homeowner owns between the other part of the valve to their water meter. That side, we don't have a strong baseline. That's from the building department, and that's going to be required by 2024 to really get a comprehensive understanding of how many service lines do the actual homeowners own. Anytime we go ahead.
How much is a single home supposed to have?
Well,
Is there a limit? Is there a max or min?
No. So you mean as far as like a
house?
Yeah. So basically, everybody has a service line going to their house, and the question is that service line on the owner side made of lead or is it made of copper?
And is it only one per house, or is it multiple?
Usually it's just one per house.
And so, like an apartment building, that's also one that goes into the building, and then inside the building goes wherever it goes.
Yes.
So it's one per structure, if you will.
Yeah, 99% yes, unless there's some type of sub parcel on the property and it goes through somebody else's property, but it's usually one per dwelling.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, no problem. So these laws are really going to change in the next 5 years, which, as you guys know, I've really pushed for the water filtration plant, or we need to make sure that we maintain corrosion control protection in the future. Right now, we have lime that we add to the system. It's like what's used on baseball fields, the white lime. That's what's used to increase pH and to put a barrier so that you don't have lead leaching into the water. We've reduced that number by about 50 service connections in the last 5 years. Anytime we find a service connection that's in a water main break situation and we find it in the field, we replace it. And if we see it's on the owner's side, we really push the owner to, hey, get an outside contractor. We're not allowed to work on your property, but let's get this replaced because it's in the best interest of your health. And most of the time they do that. Now what's happening is funding with the state revolving fund and through the EPA. The EPA is really pushing to change both the owner side and the water purveyor side of the service lines. So this grant could also not only help us with the 2.4, but we need to meet. We're going to have a meeting with Arcadis this next week to see what else is available as far as potential funding, because we might, as Manny mentioned, you might need more staff time to do the investigations in the homes. Like I was looking up the EPA guidelines and it says, go through the building permits, see what's there. The next step is get into the homes. Take a look to see if there's any wiped lead solder joints. Take a look to see if there's lead in the house. But it also doesn't take into account that if someone had a service line and it broke between the outside of their foundation and the house, there might be 10 feet of lead. So then the next thing the EPA says is start digging up the yard and then start using like either a backhoe or a vac system. I mean, it's like they're really pushing hard on this. We need to find out what the final protocols are, and Arcadis will help us with that. They have some lead and copper experts on this. We need to do the report anyways. We need to be in compliant. And in order for us to get this money, it has to be ready to go. So it was kind of a no-brainer to push this. We're just doing our homework and we want to get ahead of the curve. And there's times, and honestly, we're below the limit. We were, the state did some regulations where they said if you have any excursions outside of your pH, you're going to lose reduced monitoring. Well, we had reduced monitoring. We went to like monitoring instead of 30 samples every 3 years, we went to 60 samples every 6 months. So we've sampled like all over the village and town like crazy. We've met the requirements, but there are some areas that have lead services, and we've logged them down on at least on our side. We'd like to get a better number on the owner's side, and this will help us setting up these protocols. But it's going to take help with the building department too. So it's there's a lot of record retention and like investigation, and you know, lead services were put in before 1970 something. So let's not look after a certain year because it's a waste of our time. So I want to give them a good report. I want to make sure it's safe.
Hey, Andy,
Yeah.
maybe expand a little bit on some of the lead concerns that we have had historically, were actually, like you said, past ours and actually inside the building, not just the service line.
Yeah.
But in the
So-
actual piping in some of the older buildings, there's the solder joints and they're lead solder. And in the old buildings where you have stagnant water, that tends to leach. Like Andy said, if there's aggressive water or stagnant water, and that's how a lot of institutional buildings have that problem.
Like you mentioned, Paul, earlier, the school districts, right? The school
Right.
has lots of lead joints in their water systems. They also really aggressively 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, had some high hits in some of the local schools. School is monitored by its own state system, but we were asked to come in and talk about it. And it was because the fixtures, the old porcelain fixtures that were installed, like the old water fountains that were porcelain, had high lead in those valves that fed water up into the porcelain fixtures. So the immediate thing is get rid of the porcelain fixtures. Get rid of anything that had lead in the brass from previous years. Take a look and do swab samples to see if there was lead in some of the solder joints in the basement. So, you know, a good point is, and I spoke to Stuart about this earlier, we opened the bid for the labor bid. I know you guys know that we went out to bid for labor of changing out 1,860 meters. A contractor bid on it today. It looks like a good contractor, but we'll formally come back to you. Part of their scope of work is on that 1,860 meters out of 6,200 meters in the system. They will go in, they will log down what service line, what it's made of. Is it lead? Is it copper? They'll notify us, and they'll also swab the joints in the basement to see if there's any lead on those joints. So we're going to need to do the other 4,000, but this is good timing for us to be ahead of the curve. Oh, and the health department, when we do get a higher lead reading, the first thing they say is, did you go and, you know, like Steve Powell was doing a lot of that from the filter plant. Did you investigate the house? Did you look to see what numbers were on the faucet that were taken out? Is there any dates and any timelines that faucet was made? You know, it's a big deal.
Okay. Thank you, folks. It's water day today. I love it. I mean, we live on the Hudson, and frankly, it's like next time we do a logo in the next 70 years from now, we got to remember to make it all about the water. Don't quote me. Questions, comments? Thank you, Andy and Paul. Nope.
I have a
Not seeing
question.
anybody?
I have a few questions, maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please, Manny.
Andy, so maybe, I hope I didn't miss it. So this grant is to do this investigation and also not replacement, correct? The replacement will be on the owner's cost. Is that correct?
This grant is to take all the information, like we had a very aggressive water sanitarian for the last 5 years who left, who really pushed us to have a materials list. So we were kind of ahead of the curve based on other municipalities. We had a lot of this information. So we're giving them our information. As you know, some of us that you're aware, we hired Mike DiMartino, our ex-water foreman, to come back and help us go through these tons of records to come up with a comprehensive list. Arcadis is going to take that list and they're going to put it in a report as far as actions, what's required by the EPA, and make it into a comprehensive application so that hopefully we get that 2.4 million. They also have ideas of, like, you know, what we can get paid for as far as staffing to keep that plan up, because as you know, your experience with the building department, you can imagine going through 4,000 other building records to see what's really there. That's
Maybe-
our unknown.
Yeah, so maybe we can get a program, you mean, a better program that we have as a Munis, I guess. I'm gonna throw that one out there. So my question is still is, so let's say you find lead pipe from the main to someone's house. So now you have that in the report. How do you deal, is the homeowner have to pay to that lead pipe to be replaced? Or is this going to be able to help some of that stuff?
In the old days, yes. In the old days, yes. But now these grants that are coming out, the state is going to pay for it.
So the state will pay for a full replacement from those main,
if we get the grant, the state, if we get the grant, if not, it's something we'll have to determine locally, what the village is willing to pay. But then there's also, Stewart's side, do you get access agreements? How do you deal with insurance? What if someone gets hurt on someone's property? Do we work on people's property? Yes, we change out water meters. That's as far as we go. But now you're talking excavation and other things.
Okay.
So that's part of this whole process. It's evolving. And the thing is Arcadis really pushed us to go for this because they said we were kind of ahead of it, and there's a lot of money out there to do this.
Okay.
So it's like, why not?
I agree. I think it'll be interesting to see moving forward. I'm in support of this. So thank you, Andy. Thank you, Paul. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All righty, thank you, folks. Very much appreciate it. What is next on the agenda?
Hey, next on the agenda, the board will be reviewing the application for cabaret license from Serenita Lounge.
Can't hear you because you moved right in the middle
Oh,
there.
sorry. The board will be asked to review a cabaret license for Serenita Lounge. We have Corporation Counsel Stuart Hahn, and we have Lieutenant Brendan Donahue, who is sitting in for Chief Sylvester tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks, and thank you, Lieutenant, for being here. I have sent to you the application, the new application, plus a most recent redacted blotter entry from the location from an incident that I believe occurred on August the 4th at that location. I believe that Mr. Collado, who is the principal of the applicant, may be viewing this and may want to address the board at some point if the board wants to hear from him. But this is a reapplication. Let me just read what Lieutenant Donahue had put into his note from August the 2nd. Of the 95 calls for service at this location since 1/1/19, which include calls classified as disturbances, altercations, assaults, and a robbery, 29 of these calls were for noise complaints. This call count excludes traffic stops, premises checks, stop and walk patrols excluded. There were also 12 documented incidents during this period in which the premises flouted county health law by providing hookahs for their patrons to smoke inside the premise. So that's the report from the lieutenant, and it is an application. Both the lieutenant and I are here to answer any questions that this board may have. upon this reapplication by Serenita Lounge.
When was the last time they put in the application?
I believe it was earlier in 2022, and that was, as the board knows, it was denied.
Yeah, I know, but what month? Do you remember?
I think January or February. I can go back and look for when the resolution was done, Mayor, but I think it
Got
was
it.
earlier. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Okay. Officer Donahue, do you have anything to add?
Just a minor correction. I believe it was actually the 6th, but it was at 4 a.m. So that's probably where.
That's where I got the flip. Thank you, Brendan.
Yep. During the incident on the 6th around 4 a.m., there was a large group outside the bar, a group of patrons. And during that incident, 2 parties were assaulted by a third. One of the parties was allegedly repeatedly kicked while he was on the ground, resulting in a broken jaw. And the second victim was struck in the head with a bottle, causing a serious laceration. And the suspect was arrested and is currently facing 2 assault charges and a menacing charge, the top charge being a D felony because it did involve a deadly weapon or dangerous instrument.
Officer Donahue, what time is the bar supposed to close? 4 a.m.?
4 a.m. is when they must stop serving alcohol. They are allowed to permit people to remain in the bar for a period after that, and then eventually they can't allow anybody to even continue to consume the alcohol which they purchased prior to 4 a.m. That's by state liquor law.
So it's still open at 4 a.m.?
Presumably.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Does anybody in the board wish to see or hear from Mr. Collado? I don't know if I'm saying the name right. I personally don't, but certainly if another board member would like to hear from him and he's in attendance, be happy to bring him over. I'm going to take that as a no since I hear no one saying yes. Is that correct?
That would be correct. I guess my
Okay.
question, Lieutenant, I just had a question from Lieutenant Donahue. Had they in the past, one of the things that we always have said to any applicant where we had rejected their application, I want to say, is to go back and have a conversation with the police department and to try to see how can they work together. Is your knowledge that they have done anything like that? Have they approached the police department to work together to try to fix some of the stuff that they had in the past?
Not to my knowledge, no. I would likely be the point of contact there, and I haven't received any communications of any kind.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments about this request? Desire to approve or not approve the cabaret license?
I'm still unclear about what is different this time from last time.
Oh, for me, it's gotten worse. So that to me is the only difference, is that it's gotten more violent, more police calls, more bad neighbor behavior than after all the conversations we had last time. So that for me is the only, but I don't know if Stuart or Lieutenant Donahue have anything to add to that. Is there
Mayor,
any difference?
I think and Lieutenant, apologize, the timing is more, Trustee Lopez, is, I believe, although it's not in the resolution, the applicant at that point was told, come back in 6 months. And he came back in 6 months. So that's
right.
But
if I remember correctly, and you know, who knows if I do, the reason was, let's take the time to demonstrate improvement. And given the state of things at that point, the answer can't be yes. And so if you take the next X amount of time, let's say 6 months, demonstrate improvement, then we can approve. But like you said, Mayor, things only seem to have gotten worse.
Correct. So I would make the suggestion that we try another 6 months. I don't know what we're going to do after the next 6 months and how long the board has the appetite to have a business that is causing damage, is participating by not stopping all the other activities that are going on and taking so much police time for this sort of one entity. And it's in a, like almost everything in Ossining, to be honest, is, in fairness to them, but almost everything is somewhere inside a residential area. The town has areas where that may be different, but mostly businesses in the village are amidst, you know, residential area. And I don't think it's fair to the residents in our community to have this going on. So I don't know if somebody has a different idea, but I would go with another 6 months and see if things get better, because at this point, as you said, Trustee Lopez, I personally don't see any reason to give them a cabaret. I have other questions as to how we stop so much of the other stuff that's going on, but that's not what the discussion is with us right now. Anybody have any other thoughts?
Did want to let you know that Mr. Collado now has his hand up. Did you want me to bring him over?
I didn't hear anybody on the board wishing to hear from Mr. Collado. This is not
Maybe Mr. Collado can tell us if he's tried to make any changes. I don't know. I feel I wouldn't mind hearing from him.
okay. Well, that was why I asked before. So you can bring Mr. Collado over, Jamie.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Mr. Collado, we're bringing you over. If you can turn on your camera, please, and unmute. His phone is connecting now.
Okay.
Mr. Collado, can you please unmute?
Not seeing him.
Trustee Lopez, maybe he speaks Spanish? Sorry.
or Manny, either of you.
Mauri, usted puede, tiene que subir el volumen, o sea, tiene que, ahora mismo en la aplicación de Zoom tiene la opción de quitarse, de prender la voz. Debe ver dos opciones, uno para video y uno para su voz. Para el micrófono, tiene que prender el micrófono para... Oh, parece que está funcionando ahora.
Yeah, it
¿Puedes
looks like he
hablar?
did.
No lo oímos todavía.
Ok.
Ahora lo vemos. ¿Puedes decir algo?
Puede.
Does
Sí,
he speak
puede tú
English?
lo que yo voy a decir.
All right, he's good.
¿Puede traducirme lo que yo voy a decir, por favor?
Sí, he's asked me to translate. Go ahead. Sigue.
Buenas noches para todos los que están aquí, la policía de Ossining y el town de Ossining
Good evening,
también.
everyone that's here, the police and the board of trustees.
Yo apliqué de nuevo porque me dijeron que en 6 meses aplicara otra vez y que
I
había que
applied
haber
again
cambios.
because they told me that in 6 months to apply again.
Sí hubo cambio porque la música no hubo llamada de música como
There were changes
anteriormente.
because the music, there were no calls about the music.
Y sí he hecho cambio y como dijo el sargento de la policía, que yo no lo he tratado de buscar, yo sí he ido allá y he querido hablar con ellos para que nos pongamos de acuerdo, que me ayuden en yo estar disponible en lo que podamos hacer, pero cuando yo voy allá no quieren, no hablan conmigo. Y yo
Yes,
digo
I
lo que
have
soy
made changes, and the lieutenant who is here, when I've gone down to the police station to go down and try to talk about what we can do differently, they won't speak with me.
Y la otra cosa, te digo, del accidente que pasó, eso pasó afuera y yo no puedo controlar lo que pasa tanto afuera, porque mi negocio yo lo cierro a las 3:30 de la mañana, todo el mundo sale, yo tengo que estar adentro limpiando y encargándome de todo, y es un poco imposible tú saber lo que pasa afuera.
And in terms of the incident that happened outside, I can't really control what happens outside of my business. I close at 3:30 a.m. and I'm inside. I'm closing, I'm shutting it down, and I have no control over what happens outside in the street.
Y yo, cuando me di cuenta, yo salí afuera, ayudé a la policía. Estaba ahí, la cámara lo mira, que yo hice todo lo posible por ayudar y que se resuelva el caso, qué fue lo que pasó. Y yo tengo 4 años siendo dueño de Sirenita y es la primera vez que en 4 años que me pasa eso. Quiero que entiendan eso, por favor.
And when I noticed what was happening outside, I went outside and the police were there and I was cooperative with the police. I have cameras all over and there is video evidence that shows me cooperating with the police in order to stop it. And in the 4 years that I've owned the business, I've never had an incident like this.
Muchas gracias. Solo eso.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, I guess he doesn't speak English, so let me make a few comments. It is, number one, is the establishment's responsibility for serving people liquor and what happens even when they leave their establishment. That's a part of the licensing. I'm sure Stuart will correct me. My understanding is that he's responsible for his business, the sidewalk cleanliness, and the liquor that he serves, which causes people to drink so much. If, for example, one of his customers had an accident leaving his establishment, he's liable for it. I'll stop there.
¿Usted entendió eso, Mario? ¿Quiere que le traduzca?
Yo entiendo, sí.
Sí, he understood. Yeah.
Good. Number two, it's hard for me to believe that you went to the police department and tried to speak to the police officers, because there's also the village management building, which is actually close by to your establishment, that you could speak with Attorney Stuart Kahan, who you have met many times, village clerk. Many of these locations have Spanish-speaking people too, if the language was a barrier, including our police department. So I find that just hard to believe, because generally speaking, we have found that our staff in all those departments do try to be helpful to people. That's applause.
You got it.
Good. So, understand. I got it. So you understand.
Yeah, he understands.
Lastly, the reason you were given six months isn't to simply come back to us. It's to improve. Part of the licensing for cabaret isn't whether it's a disturbance about music. It is about the establishment. The police, by the way, does not recommend whether we should go forward or not. Oftentimes the chief of police says, I can't tell you whether you should give them a cabaret license. I can't. That's not our job. Our job is simply to report the data points. It is for the board to then decide whether they're going to extend or give a license. So based on those data points and the number of calls and complaints and issues arising at your establishment, the board takes that information into consideration. And as has been stated, because there has been no improvement, it seems to me that the board in majority is leaning to not give you the cabaret license based on everything we said before you came on. And we do hold you responsible for what happens in your establishment and your clients when they leave your establishment. That actually is part of the requirements of people in your industry. It may not be the same in other businesses, but it is in what you're licensed to do. I think I'm reading the board correctly, that we have a majority vote. We would extend it that you can come back in 6 months, but you will have to improve the situation that is occurring there for us to consider the application again.
Porque there's Spanish people, please, can I explain him?
I'll translate, go ahead.
Yeah, yo lo traduzco.
Okay. Hay más negocios que tienen la licencia de cabaret y ha pasado incidente. ¿Por qué a mí me dan tan duro Si yo trato de
There are
hacer
other
lo mejor
businesses that have
para...
also had incidents. Why are you hitting me so hard?
No, we have,
Porque
you are not the only one that we have denied a cabaret license to, actually, and exactly for the same reasons. And other establishments do not have the same volume of problems. Everybody has little problems. We agree with you, but we're talking about volume here and your responsibility to be a good neighbor to the community in which you are doing business. Nobody's picking on you. You're being treated the way everybody else is. They manage their business a little differently. Some of them have made improvements that the police have reported on, and their numbers have been lowered. We want everyone to succeed in business that does business in Ossining, but there has to be some boundaries set. So we can do this in 6 months. You make appropriate improvements, and we will reconsider, which I think is what we discussed last time as well. And we had suggested that you speak with the police. We had suggested that you speak with the village manager to learn more and better about how you might improve the business outcomes that you have.
And if I could just add and put a fine point on it, we have Lieutenant Donahue on the line, and I know that he and the team, particularly the Spanish-speaking officers, would be more than happy to meet with you. The next step that I personally would be looking for is for conversation between you and Lieutenant Donahue and whomever else that could help to facilitate from a language perspective in order to be specific about what are the kinds of improvements that are possible, that are realistic, because we don't want you to do the impossible. We want you to do the possible. And so working together with the police, specifically with Lieutenant Donahue, I think that you'd be able to find what the next step in the process would be.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
And I don't know if you guys are done. I just wanted to add something as well.
Please, I was opening it up to everybody. It wasn't.
Thank you. So I'm gonna say it in English. You tell me if you want me to go into Spanish as well. But a couple months back, we had a meeting with the Spanish local business in here, and Lieutenant Donahue was part of that meeting as well. In a meeting, there was a lawyer involved, and they were trying to get together at that time. It wasn't just bars, it was just everything, like a whole cluster of Spanish businesses in there. But one of the things that we talked about in that meeting was how to improve your business. How do you train your staff? How do you control the crowd and overcrowding that sometimes that happens in here? So those are the type of improvements I would like to see. I'm not going to tell you 6 months from now, just whenever you come back. I think those are the improvements that me personally, I would like to see. Training your staff, have more security, have better understanding in what the situations are happening. Probably there are other recommendations that Lieutenant Donahue may have, or just an overall relationship with the police department. Obviously you just heard some of the blotter incidents that happened. The hookah stuff situation, is not suitable right now. Those are things that you need to try to understand as a business perspective, and what does that mean and what does that look like.
Te voy a hablar en español porque me defiendo más así. Yo todo eso yo lo he controlado. Y mira, yo he tratado de buscar un acercamiento con la policía. Hasta el dueño del building donde yo vivo, quisimos intentar hablar con ellos, pero no se ha tratado un acercamiento. Si ustedes me ayudan, hablamos con ellos. Yo he cambiado los seguridad. Si lo tengo que cambiar, lo cambio de nuevo. O sea, mi problema es mirar, que no me miren a mí mal, y que mi negocio, ustedes lo vean como ustedes lo quieran ver. O sea, yo quiero cambiar. Porque yo te puedo decir a ti que hay más negocios que tienen la licencia y no es la diferencia de lo mío. Y no quiero mencionar nada.
Déjame traducir un poco, okay? So pretty much what he's saying is, again, he's been trying to, himself, the owner of the building, have tried to have conversation with the police department. They were not able to do so. He himself, according to him, he's saying that he has changed the security already. He's trying to improve the business. I just don't.
That's fair. And when you improve the business, then you can come back. And Manny, the reason we put 6 months is because our legislation is, they can come over and over and over again, as
Correct.
Stuart had mentioned.
No,
And so
I
in a
know. I'm
time
aware.
frame
Yeah.
for, we could make it
Yeah.
any
You
amount
know,
of time.
right
months.
now, Mayor, sorry to interrupt. Right now, if he comes back in 6 months, it's more likely to be next year. Sure. And we usually try to do cabaret license at the beginning of the year. That's sort of this.
So how many months is that?
Yeah.
So we'll
That's-
make it
that's
by
not 4 months,
January.
that's-
What is that, 5 months?
Yeah, pretty much. So that's
Yeah,
what I sort of
That's
said.
fine. So 5 months.
So
That seems right.
yeah, so now the Lieutenant Donahue's here. So
Yeah.
let me ask you this. When Amaruis, when can you go to the police department? Can you go there next week on Wednesday? Let's say?
I'm ready to be tomorrow, early in the morning. I
So
don't mind.
Lieutenant Donahue, when is a good time for him to stop by the police department so he can talk to you about this issue, about this situation?
I'm always, I avail myself quite frequently to local businesses or people of concerns, people who have concerns. I'm very easy to get a hold of. If Mr. Collado wants to call ahead, I can make sure to carve out some time so I'm not called away. But we have Spanish-speaking officers that can assist. We have a language line intercom 24/7, 365 in our lobby. So, no one is ever turned away who shows up with a complaint or concern, whether there's a language barrier or not. And I would just like to say, for the record, since there was a suggestion that there were no noise complaints during the period we were discussing, there were 12 noise complaints in the first half of this year from this establishment. So just to set the record straight.
Understood.
So tomorrow, give the police department a call, ask for Lieutenant Donahue, find out what his availability is either tomorrow or the next day or the following week, set up an appointment and and you can go from there. That's my suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be there early to make an appointment, or I call him. But I really need to talk to you about what I can do, because I want to changes. I make changes, but I want to continue to make changes, because I want to keep with my business. I'm young, I'm working hard, and I don't do bad things. I want to be like different. I don't sell no drugs. I'm working hard. And just, you gotta understand that I'm here to working. I'm coming to my country to working hard, and I got my kid. I'm married, and I just want to get you understand. I'm
I think
30,
we all
34
I think
years.
nobody's questioning that you're working hard. You just need to, you're in the selling of liquor business. There are a lot of licenses and a lot of issues and a lot of rules. And that is the business that you've chosen. And it's suggested that you meet with the local police department. Lieutenant Donahue has made himself available at any time and all times, as he's already stated. So hopefully next time we see you, there will be marked improvements, and not just in your business, but also in the things that are happening there in the community. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Next topic on the agenda. I'm sorry.
The next topic on our agenda is Trustee Lopez has brought up an issue that has been discussed widely this year about our quality of roads and what we can do to ensure quality of roads and work with our partners at the state level and at Con Edison to make sure that we are maintaining quality and communication with the community when road work's being done. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Trustee Lopez and our Director of Public Works, Paul Fraioli.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Karen. It's now time. It's 9:36. The headline of today's work session is finally here. We're starting with quality roads, quality village. I'm going to share my screen in just a minute. Okay, you all can see that? Give me a thumbs up.
Thumbs up, and the logo
Thumbs
looks
up.
great.
Great. Doesn't it though? Great.
It really does.
Quality roads, quality village. So what is this all about? Let's start with what is the problem? Okay, so we know that the quality of our roads reflects the quality of our village. So let's take a look at what some of that looks like. We have a ton of utility work that's happening around the village. Not just now, this very moment, but for the last handful of years in particular, it's been a lot. It's a quality of life issue. We hear about it all the time. Folks want to know what work is happening. You know, one of the problems is there's no communication from Con Ed about this work. Nobody knows that lives in this area that you're seeing what's happening. It's unclear if you want to submit a complaint. To whom do you submit a complaint about noise, about your car getting messed up? What if you get frustrated and you say, you know what, I'm just going to go to the folks that are doing the work right there in the street, and I'm going to ask them, hey, what's going on? Well, you'll find they also don't know because they don't work for Con Ed. For the most part, they're subcontractors. And even if they were working for Con Ed, the way that it works is there are 3 teams. There's one team at Con Ed that submits the work to the village. There's a second team that does the work. Then there's a third team that comes in and does the remediation or the repairs. These 3 different teams don't necessarily communicate with each other. Now, let's say by some miracle, you are able to get in contact with someone at Con Ed that does have a sense of what is in the pipeline, what is actually going on with utility work in the village. Con Ed tends to move people around a lot. And so that one point of contact that you had won't necessarily be there the next time that you reach out. And the village has really heard a lot of the feedback from the community wanting to pave the roads. We get a ton of potholes that are happening in the wintertime. So in the spring and the summer, let's pave the roads. And we do. If you watch our budget meetings, which I recommend, get informed, watch the budget meetings. They're long, but put them on in the background where you're folding your laundry or something. You're going to be able to hear how every year we dedicate more and more money to paving the roads. But what happens sometimes, Con Ed will come in and do work on a road that we just recently paved. Additionally, you have the kind of environmental and health effects that go on with this kind of utility work. This, what you're seeing right now, is something called staging, right? They have to put all this equipment somewhere. So this isn't even where they're doing the work. This is just where they're storing the stuff. And, you know, it's asphalt and construction vehicles and all kinds of stuff. And it's not just utility work, right? We know that there are potholes that are throughout our streets. This is a very common thing living in the Northeast with the winters and the salt and whatever else. And so a very common thing that can happen as well is that you're driving along and you hit one of these potholes and you get a flat tire. What do? Well, you have to pay for your damaged car. You might turn to the village and say, hey, will somebody reimburse me because I damaged my car on village roads? Will you reimburse me for the $400 or whatever much it is for this flat that I had to pay for? But that's not happening a lot of the time. And I'm going to tell you in a minute why that's not happening. And we know that it's a problem because one of the things that the Federal Reserve does every year is that they survey Americans and they ask them, can you pay for a $400 emergency out of pocket without needing to go into debt? And 40% of people in this country cannot do that. They need to go into debt to pay for a $400 or more emergency. And you see these polls, these double polls. Manny, do I have to talk to you about these double polls? You know, it's not just also the roads. It's not limited to the roads. There are other kinds of issues, and this is a utility issue as well. So let's think broadly here about a way to address this. So this is the idea behind the Quality Roads, Quality Village initiative. The objective of this initiative is to improve the quality of Ossing's roads. It will be accomplished by improving communication about road work, clearer methods for submitting complaints, complete street remediation after utility work. And I say complete, again, complete, and passing legislation that supports high quality roads. But it's not easy, it's complicated. It's complicated. Why is it complicated? Well, first of all, you have these 4 roads that run through the village, 9, 9A, 133, and 134. We recognize them. Here's 9, 9A, 134, 133. These are state roads. We can't touch them. From the village, we can't touch them. In order for them to be fixed, in order for the potholes there to be fixed, it needs to be the Department of Transportation for the state. Okay. So you have these kind of 3 entities, if you will. You have the village, you have the state, and you have Con Ed. And when you walk around, if you were to talk to people in the village, they can't answer most of these questions having to do with issues with the quality of our roads. With the village, how does the village decide which roads to pave? Will the village reimburse me if my car gets damaged from a pothole? Whose responsibility is it to fix the sidewalks? From the state level, whose responsibility is it to report and fix damaged state roads? What is the New York State Department of Transportation's process for identifying damaged roads? Spoiler, they don't have one. And for Con Ed, what are the projects they're working on? What are the steps involved with those projects? And what's the timeline for all these various projects? Well, you know me, I'm not here to dwell on the problems. Let's talk about the solutions. From a village level, the focus is communication and what I'm calling the Pothole Patrol. We can change the name. I'm not married to the name, but the idea is this. With communication, we have a section of our website right now that's about Department of Public Works. And on that website, you can get information about various things happening around the village, including road work like paving village roads or some utility work. And so we're going to beef it up with information on the paving of village roads. Remember, this is the village level that we're talking about here. When it comes to the car damage, one of the things I was able to speak with our corporation counsel, Stuart Kahan, about the car damage and what the deal is there. And on average in a year, about 30 times a year, he gets someone from the community reaching out. And it's mostly people that are from Ossining. So despite the fact that you have these roads that connect Ossining to these various communities, it's not people from other communities that are necessarily having the issues. They're Ossining community members that are reaching out and saying, hey, my car got damaged. Usually it's something like a flat tire or something along those lines. Will you reimburse me? And the answer is mostly no, because in order for someone to be reimbursed, the pothole or the damage, whatever it is, needs to be reported to the village clerk first. Now, the first time that it's kind of in the village's awareness is that a car gets damaged, then that person is out of luck. And then it's really the next person that kind of counts as the reporting. The next person whose car gets damaged then would be able to get the reimbursement. What I'm proposing is this: Pothole Patrol. So it could be village employees, it could be folks in the community, it could be a combination of the two, but sometime in the spring or early summer, there's an annual survey of all of the damage that is on village roads. It's categorized, it's submitted to the village clerk, and then it's addressed. But even if it's unaddressed, if someone does have their car damaged, then they're able to get reimbursed. How great is that? On a state level, similar idea, communication, communicating to folks. These are not complicated issues. These are relatively straightforward issues. But remember, we live in a place where people will still, they grew up here, will ask us, what's the difference between the town and the village of Ossining? So trying to communicate, well, it's North Highland, but it's a state road. Yes, it's Dale, but there's actually a state road. Yes, you know, it's not the most straightforward thing, but we can communicate and people are smart. And so we can be clear about what is a state responsibility. And then once again, the Pothole Patrol, we do the same thing, but we go through the Department of Transportation to let them know what all the potholes are. And then we have some great candidates running for state assembly and state senate. Dana, Pete, I'm talking to you. We're going to need your partnership to get the Department of Transportation to go in and fix those things. Because as of right now, they don't have a method of going into communities to proactively identify where are the potholes, where are the issues, and let's fix them. They react. And so we need to give them something to react to. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same exact situation, right? So we need to do something. And this is one thing that we can do. Go out, categorize it, write it down, submit it to them, hold them accountable. Our friends at Consolidated Edison. This is another two-parter, communication and legislation. It's a little bit more complex, so let's break it down by part. First, communication. So here's what we have now on the Village website. So the most recent road work notice, and I'm going to point your attention to this sentence here. It says, Con Edison presently has ongoing work on North and South Highland Avenue, Dale Avenue, Croton Avenue, and miscellaneous roads throughout the village. So that's our starting place. What I'm proposing is, as we're beefing up the DPW website, where are my journalists at? It's the 5 W's and the H. Who knows this? Who, what, when, where, why, how. Okay? Who is the main point of contact at Con Ed? Don't tell me nobody. We're going to get a main point of contact, period. What work are they doing? When will it be complete? And if it changes, mark that too. They told us it was going to be November. Oh, wait. Then they came back and said it's going to be March. Oh, wait. Hold them to something. When will it be complete? Where will it take place? Both the work and the staging. Let's put it out there. Where is this taking place? Why is it happening at all? Make it clear. Make it clear. And how will the local residents be notified that this work is happening? Sending emails, putting a big sign up. You know how when we construct buildings, there's a big placard up, there's a big sign that says, here's what they're building and here's who to contact. Here's what it's going to look like. Do that. Put a big placard up whenever they're doing big construction. I'm not talking about little things, big projects. Big project, big sign. Little project, little sign. Put a notice on people's doors. Why couldn't we do these things? We can. Yes, we can. 2008. How about this? How about having our friends at Con Ed fire up their Zoom? We know they know how to use it. If at that point we're in person, they can come down to 16 Croton Avenue and visit us and present maybe twice a year on the projects that they have going on in the village. But Omar, that's preposterous. They're not going to come to Ossining to present. Well, did you know that in June of 2001, that's just last year, they sent not one, but 2 representatives to the great town of Scarsdale to present about projects. Look at this. Look at these slides. Traffic detours. Look at this. Project overview. Look at this logo. Con Ed. They can do it. They know how to do it. So they're going to do it here. You know who this is? Anybody know who this is? It's Tim Cawley, Timothy Cawley. That's the CEO of Con Ed. And here he is in Westchester. We know where Westchester is. Look, he's in Westchester. So we don't have to have him come down, but he can send somebody. We can reach out to Tim and let him know we'd like him to do that. Next is legislation. But Omar, does it really make sense to pass legislation? Or Ardsley thinks so. So does Mamaroneck and Tarrytown, White Plains, Mount Kisco. Heard of them? Scarsdale, New Rochelle, Hastings. Thank you to Maddie for reaching out to her friends, municipal government all throughout the county to find out who has legislation related to managing utility work. Look at these 8. This is just a start. These are 8. We know for sure that we're right now working on getting that legislation, working through to see what makes sense here in Ossining, then presenting it. Now, what's an example of this? So one that is in Ardsley and Mamaroneck and Scarsdale are minimum pavement restoration limits. So that says a road must either be repaved to the center line or curb to curb, depending on the level of work. Now, I've worked with Paul on this project as well, and God bless him, because he's been out there. There are times when they want to do the absolute minimum, and he's been out there pushing for them to repave curb to curb. And thank you, like truly thank you for pushing. But should it be up to someone like Paul to get that done? Or should we say we have a minimum qualification, we have standards in this community? Because we know that the quality of our roads reflects the quality of our village. And so we want to have roads that reflect the quality that we believe in. And now, with no further ado, your questions.
Okay. Very nicely done.
Maybe before some of the questions come up, I can maybe append some of Omar's comments. Mayor,
Okay.
may I?
Sure.
Thank you, Omar. Nice job. A lot of good points you brought up that we discussed in our earlier conversations. So thank you for that and your continued support. I was just making some notes when you were speaking, and because I hadn't seen the presentation yet, so excuse me for just referring to my notes here. So with regard to addressing the village potholes from a village perspective on village roads, every spring, the crews do go out there on their pothole efforts. They're not really reactionary. It's more of, we know they're going to be there. It's a byproduct of the Northeast after the winter, particularly the winters we've been having. So, and that really coincides with the opening of the regional blacktop plants. Can't really do a restoration appropriately until the blacktop plants open. And once they do, we do send crews out there, and they go out there every day and they hit every road that needs it, and they just do it perpetually. If there's an egregious one that either gets called in by somebody or that's noticed by somebody on staff, we do sometimes jump out of the loop, if you will, or the regiment, and take care of that one as it goes. When we notice them on state roads, we certainly notify them, and that happens routinely for Dale Avenue, Upper Croton Avenue, and all the other state roads that you mentioned. So it's happening internally now as far as community involvement is concerned, and the idea is about creating a list. I think that's something we could discuss further offline, because there are other things that come to play with regard to claims against the village. I do testify a lot on behalf of the village when claims are made against the village, as Stuart knows, and Stuart deals with a lot of them internally. And the short version of why we need to discuss it further, because not all claims are warranted.
Is that somebody playing an instrument in somebody's background?
No, that's I'm sorry, that's my guard dogs downstairs, and I'm
Oh,
sorry,
really?
you can actually
No,
hear them.
that's okay. It reminds me of my younger days when I tried to play an instrument. I was going to say,
Yeah.
well, pretty good, but your kids are a little older, so who
Well,
knows? No, it's fine, Paul. I just didn't know if it was somebody that could put on mute, but you're talking, so keep going.
He weighs about 5 pounds, so his bark is definitely bigger than his bite. The state actually, I thought you had it when you called up our webpage there. You don't need to go back into your presentation. The state actually does have like a pothole hotline. I don't know how effective it is. We don't really call the hotline. We call the state maintenance yard directly when we call it in. And a lot of folks do call in potholes on state roads, and we relay that information for them. We don't tell them to call the state hotline, but we do tell them you can also call the state hotline. So maybe, a double whammy gets them to react. But sometimes they have a lot of territory. I'll leave it at that. So sometimes Austin doesn't get the immediate attention that we would like it to get. What else did I write here? We also, okay. As far as contacts for Con Edison does have, I believe on their website, a claim form where if you do have any utility type claim that you want to make, you can make that as a resident. The municipal, I think it is a good idea to maybe solicit some type of presentation like that. But the municipal liaisons and the emergency contacts for Con Ed that are provided to the village government entities are strictly for village government. we obviously cannot hand out our municipal liaison's cell phone number or the folks that we deal with on that level to try to get some of the things we get done. But there are general public information numbers that we can call. And if they do it, if it does reach a level where this is really a critical issue that needs to be addressed, and it has happened before, we have contacted the liaisons on their behalf when those calls come into our office. So we don't, leave people in the lurch, particularly if there's a life safety issue. We are in contact with Con Ed a lot. And you're right. The comparison to the other municipalities in Westchester, I could tell you that this is not a Ossining-centric issue. I think you all know that if you expand out beyond Ossining. I mean, and then I'm not calling any municipalities out, but some of the more recent ones, if you go into the town of Newcastle for any reason, they had the entire downtown ripped up for 2 years, and it was really like a disaster zone down there, and it was Dale Avenue times 10, and it was but now they have a beautiful thoroughfare, and that's and I know it's very, very frustrating when they're doing work of this magnitude, but we have to maintain the relationships to make sure that that end result and that end job that they give to us at the end is reflected in that work as a return, as a thank you, and a quality completion of a very tumultuous effort on their part. The money that came into this village in the form of their storm hardening funds that really stemmed up from, and I can't remember the name of the storm, but it's the one where everybody lost power for 7 days straight in this region. The federal government and Con Ed themselves put forth a storm hardening program, and that is presented to us, not the board, but it is presented to the administration of the town and the village when they come to see us every year. And the storm hardening money started to flow about 4 years ago when they started doing all of the new poles. They're still doing new pole work, but they also included gas main upgrade. And that gas main upgrade, they went to all the communities that had the oldest infrastructure. And Ossining is an old river town. It had a lot of old gas mains in it, and they hit this area hard. But they, I live in Yorktown, and Nice Egg hit their area hard. I spend a lot of time in White Plains. They dug up White Plains like you wouldn't believe. So they're doing a lot of work. And I will tell you that it is a bureaucratic entity. As you began your presentation, it's very bureaucratic, and people do move around a lot. And sometimes it's like nailing jelly to the wall to get answers and straight answers. And sometimes, the left hand there doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and they're even aware of it. They do come in when their engineering department decides they're going to replace a gas main on a road that their paving department just told us in writing, you can go ahead and pave Village of Ossining because we have no planned work on there. And you're right, a couple of years later, or sometimes less, they come in and they dig it up. Extremely frustrating, but at the end of the day, it is a utility in the right of way. The steward knows they have the legal recourse to come in. So then it goes back to, so what are we doing about it from a legislation perspective? We do have legislation. We discussed that too. The legislation, and I was actually reviewing this with Stuart, we can expand on the legislation to make it really, it's already concrete, it's legislation, but we can provide some more details after the experience of the last few years that really drill down on this is what the legislation says. But a large part of the legislation, the way ours is written, and I don't want to sit here and bore you guys, but I just pulled it out and printed it out. In section 229 on macadam pavements, which essentially is blacktop, it says essentially what we expect the company or any entity digging in the road to do for our restoration of a trench or the road itself. But then it also says at the discretion of the director, and the director in our village code is synonymous with village engineer. They're one and the same. So that gives all the the power to our office. And when they come in and do this work, which they pay a permit fee for, they get a permit. And on that permit, this is something we did. I think I discussed this with you too, Trustee Lopez. When they really started hammering away in the village a few years ago, we expanded the permit that Con Ed submits to us to include full width restoration at my discretion. And that is why all the road restoration work that they've done on Camp Woods, Narragansett, Pine Avenue, these are village roads, of course. There's a lot of roads out there. The one I can't think of right now connecting Pleasantville to Upper Croton Avenue by Melrose over there. All those roads that formerly we would have to fight them for it, they've all done full width milling and full width pavement restoration. That's a expensive job, but they're doing it because we're telling them to do it. And they really have no recourse to say, no, we won't do it. And we also collect the permit fees, which I think, when we were talking about this about 4 months ago, we didn't get into this level, but we talked a little bit about Con Ed at a work session. I think the estimate I gave you for permit fees was in excess of $50,000 last year. And we're going to be right up again there this year. But not maybe that close, because most of this work, and this is really for me, the most beneficial part for everybody to see in Trustee Lopez's presentation was this really is a tri-party effort to get this done right. And the village is at the bottom of that party. The state and Con Ed are at the top of that party right now, because they've ripped up Highland Avenue for a couple of years straight now, and they've been on Dale Avenue for, as you know, into their second year. The village, the manager's office and my offices work very closely with Sandy Galeff's office in soliciting Region 8 state DOT participation to a level that we want them to ask for restoration of those state roads at the level that we ask for restoration on the village roads. So far, so good. We've got a lot of verbal, sounds good. We're going to talk about restoration. Con Ed has agreed to bring the village to the DOT meetings and all their restoration meetings, which has not happened before. So that's new and that's positive. And I'm looking forward to participating, because, the regional people that oversee this work, Dale Avenue really is not a big deal to them. The director's office, he had to throw me way down the ladder to get to someone that could talk about the project, because they're not really even aware of it, if you will. They know somewhere down the ladder, someone issued a permit to Dale Avenue, but Dale Avenue ultimately is, less than 2,000 feet of state road. And Region 8 is a big region. It's like the southeast portion of the state. So Dale Avenue is this to them, but it's not like that to us. It's a major road, and so is Highland Avenue. And we're trying to maintain a good relationship with all those three parties to make sure this gets done right. And so far, so good. And I'd like to just give you some specifics now, because this is hot off the press, because I was holding up issuing a permit for them on Narragansett Avenue, because they want to, as you also know, they're well into the town now, digging up the town roads, and they're across on 134, and they're all over Croton Dam Road and all up around Feeney Road. It's not village centric, but I did hold up that permit until I got an update from them, which they just sent me. So I'm gonna read it to you directly, because it pertains to all the roads that Trustee Lopez said. And the Con Ed, I won't include names, but the Con Ed rep that sent this to me, who's running the gas main operations right now and is pulling the permits, he's actually an Austin resident, and he has he's very happy to live here, and he has a vested interest as a resident in things going well. And this is what he just sent me. Dale Avenue from Glen to north of Pine Avenue, including Pine, will be completed with the gas and temporary restoration with no plates on the road by the end of August. Restoration meeting will need to be done with the state for Dale Avenue afterwards. Dale Avenue between Croton Avenue and Glen will be completed and temporarily restored by mid-September. Restoration meeting will need to be done with the state for Dale afterwards. Highland Avenue and Fuller Road gas work will be completed and backfilled by the end of August. Restoration meeting will need to be done with the state for South Highland. Croton Dam Road still have 2 weeks to install pipe from Spring Pond to North. I asked them about the town too, because I think a lot of you are interested in that too. Spring Pond to north of Minkle Road. Still need to cross 9A, and we need to figure out and schedule something to do that by the end of August. On Narragansett Avenue, we're still on the town portion installing pipe and need to work our way to 70 Narragansett in the village. That's why we're still waiting on the village permit to continue. We will have a restoration meeting with the state for Croton Dam Road. And he has also put in here that he's going to make sure that I'm included in the restoration meetings with the state. So we really are in touch with them daily. We get so many calls into our office about this work. Some of it, we can help people if there was significant damage. We'll try to direct them to the right way. If that doesn't happen as often as just the general calls that you want to know, when are you going to be done, or when are they going to be done, and what's the end result, and what does this mean for the village? Ultimately, what it means for the village is, we're responsible for your water, your sewer, your stormwater, and your potable water in the road. They're responsible for the gas, and under the ground, we're going to have all new gas mains, which is a tremendous life safety improvement. And we want you to know that DPW is very sympathetic to what we're subjected to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know if there's a need, unless Omar wants to go back and forth, but if I may interject my thoughts to take it up 30,000 feet in the air. When I looked at Trustee Lopez's presentation, he was asking for more updated, accurate information on the website. Paul, you just spent 10 minutes talking about things that many of us didn't know about that are very positive, super positive things. It's not on the website. The idea that you have a liaison, that you get an average of X number of calls, that you speak with them, that there is legislation that prevents and that we manage that, and all of that other stuff, information brings with it lots of power to the consumer, in the sense of not in a negative, but in a positive. You're doing all of this, but no one knows you're doing any of this. And so the vacuum that's created is that people don't think anybody's doing anything. So I think communication was sort of on many of the slides of saying, update the website, say what you know, say what you don't know. Even when you just read what you read and said, oh, this will be ready at the end of August, and this will be done after that. So I heard after that, and I said, oh, that must be within a month. Somebody else in the gallery could have heard that and said, what does after that mean? Does that mean another year? Does that mean? So on a website, somebody could say, on the average, it takes 3 to 6 months to fix whatever. You and I spoke earlier today, and you were telling me about the porta potty. That's required. It has to sit somewhere. It should be on the website. Look, these guys have to go to the bathroom, and ladies and the men and the women. We have to put it somewhere. No matter where we put it, it's not great. And it has to be there by law, by workers' rights, or whatever it is. I think communication and saying all the good stuff that you're saying, that's what I heard Trustee Lopez say about communication. I'm not sure that it's like, I need to know every pothole. I think it's more of we're not communicating the positives. For the negatives, it's obvious that we should also put that in there. But even the things that we're doing well, and the Con Ed, by the way, is doing well on behalf of the village, is nowhere to be found. And in this day and age, I don't know about everybody else, but if I need information, I don't call anybody anymore because nobody answers. Not only at Con Ed, but anywhere. I go on their website and I look for information. I put in the search bar, I say whatever I say. So when our website in the village doesn't depict a lot of the good work and explanations, a set of definition, explanations of, these are the roads that we've done and these are the other roads. The fact that we do report the potholes on behalf of our community. You said every day. I would be happy to hear that you were doing it weekly. I don't even need you to say every day. And we do that on your behalf. And here are some numbers to call, but we will call for you if we had to. A lot of this stuff needs to be communicated. So that's one thing I heard, is more updated, easier to understand communication about what your department's doing, what the village is doing, what Con Ed is doing. Everybody is simply trying to do their job. I mean, I, for one, don't ever question that. So nobody's trying to make any of us miserable. There are no bad intentions. Some of the results may come off in a different way. So I think that's one thing that's being asked, and I think that's very clear. And that the website get updated bi-weekly, monthly, that there shouldn't be something from May in August on the website, as an example. I'm not saying that it's still there. I'm simply saying part of communication today is that it's got to be faster. The other thing I heard is about legislation, but it appears that you might have legislation. Well, that should be up on the website too. No one should have to go and look up legislation in our E360 that, you need a law degree to understand, I'm sorry to say. But legislation that you've worked hard, and the decisions that you make, also fabulous to communicate that. But the legislation could be even on your website, so people don't have to take that extra step. These are all super helpful. I personally would like to have Con Ed come. There is an election going on, and there are 2 people running for office at the state level. There's a shift in who's at our state level from what it was. And I happen to agree with Trustee Lopez that this is a time to ask them to help in getting Con Ed to come down here and take a little ride. We are small potatoes. I mean, to them, not to us, in the big picture of things. But they shouldn't just go to Scarsdale, because Scarsdale is not that much bigger than us, by the way. As a village, they're not much bigger. And having worked there for more than 9 years, I could tell you that their roads are not worse than ours. They didn't rip up their entire downtown and their entire ability to have people get to work. So they should be doing that for many municipalities. But we should just ask, and maybe they'll put us on a calendar and they'll be here in January or whenever they're available with a similar presentation, so that it shows that they care about the community, which I'm sure they do, by the way. There's no doubt in my mind. And there's also no doubt in my mind that we're small potatoes next to some of the other projects, but that doesn't matter. And my personal concern, not presented by Trustee Lopez, is that I know that you and I are very excited that soon you will be starting the 5-way intersection in the middle of our village. So, and we have a whole bunch of DRI projects. So I think it behooves us now to start updating our communication and legislation, so that, and to also let Con Ed know, not just expect them to tell us. There's going to have to be coordination with a whole bunch of things involved in our roads. There just is going to have to be. And we're going to have to ask them to do better in avoiding the scenario that you described. And I know it was only an example, I'm not holding you to it, of ripping up a road, doing really great work, and telling us that we should go and do the work because they're not going to do anything there. And after you do all that work and spend all that tax dollars that could have been spent elsewhere, boom, they're ripping up the road. Again, it happens. It's a lot of moving parts. I get it. And lastly, they have an obligation to do some better training, to have better hotlines, more people working on their end to answer consumer questions. They have a lot of customers in Ossining. They have an obligation. It is not on us to be their communicators. They have an obligation that their hotlines work, that they have multiple language. Everybody in New York State does. Everybody related to things around consumers, to putting signs up, to having employees who, when I speak to them, don't sit there and blame the village for something that, by the way, I was in the town, not the village, because they don't even know where they're standing. And as I mentioned to you, they're on their cell phones, not even managing the signs correctly, almost causing an accident. They have an obligation to have people who are qualified for the jobs that they have. That's not a lot to ask for. And we have a right to ask for that. Now, that was not in the presentation that Trustee Lopez presented, but the hotlines and all of that, I think, was part of, we should ask. I mean, because if we don't ask, we're for sure not going to get anything. You know, the potholes and all of that, of you know, documenting them and all that. We could probably, I mean, no one on this gallery, including you, Paul, I'm sure will ever say things can be done a little bit better. Everything we do in life could always be done a little better. But this is a really frustrating situation. And I agree with you. Once the roads are done, like Narragansett and Camp Woods, it looks great. And everybody's like, yeah, we get it. You got to do the work. You got to rip up the road. We understand. We know it's old roads. We're from the 1800s. I get it. I don't think people don't get it, but it really, really is frustrating to do so much damage to cars. And cars today are so expensive to repair. The gravel that goes into your exhaust system and your tires and your brakes, they're really expensive. And they're harmful, and they're harmful to people who walk on the sidewalk when all this gravel's flying around. So I think, to Trustee Lopez's point, we should go through that and see what we can do. But I think the biggest missing piece here, which was not in the presentation, is all the stuff that you guys have already done in your department that people I don't think are aware of, that are really good stuff. That should be our starting point. That, to me, is the biggest miss, not mentioned. And we take from there, and then we go to that next level that Omar is asking for. I know it's your presentation, Omar, which I appreciate. I've heard it. Am I off? Is that off the reservation here? Is this
No. And I just want to say
reasonable?
that.
Am I putting words in your mouth? I don't know.
No, not at all. So I think one of the key things on the village level was in beefing up the DPW website, which again, I see as a partnership, not a directive. It's something that we'll do together, is making it easier for folks to see all the work that has been done. Because in the 518 update, for example, it says what work had been done up to that point. And it said, we had repaved these particular roads. And to me, when I saw that, I was like, wow. Let me just get it right here. So I'm looking at it, and it says the Village Public Works Department has recently completed paving on Marble Place and Americo Circle. On the week of May 16, 2022, the village will commence work on Revolutionary Road, Chemis Avenue, and Cedar Place. Awesome. To me, there should be a place that has that and shows all of it, right? And that has that update then, and then you can see all the work that's been done and when it's been done, to see like, wow, look how much work the village is doing, as opposed to going into these kind of individual updates. So some of it is just reformatting what is already there to demonstrate what is done, because I think ultimately there is a lot of work that is being done, but it's just not packaged in a way that it's easy for folks to be able to see and understand.
I agree.
I just want to say thank you so much, Trustee Lopez, for putting this together and the effort to bring these thoughts and it was a very thoughtful presentation, and it was really pointing out some things that I think are low-hanging fruit, as well as some things that are larger, more systemic issues. So we've been talking internally about this, obviously, and I think there's things that we can do, and we have increased dramatically our ability to communicate more effectively over the years, in large part thanks to Jamie Hoffman, who's worked closely with other departments. It may be that our DPW department hasn't received that much attention from our office to provide support. Resources for this sometimes are we don't have as vast resources for communication as some other organizations do. That said, we do know what we're doing, and we can obviously do better. As the mayor just said, you can always do better. I think there's two issues, though, that there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that Paul does and his department does in forming relationships with the people they work with, who are boots on the ground, who are doing this work. The larger issue of communication from Con Ed, of the way they work and the way they communicate, we are somewhat limited as are the people that are our counterparts at Con Ed working in the community who don't always know what they're going to be doing next either. These are issues where I would say to the trustees, these are issues where your advocacy, aligned with many of your counterparts throughout the county, all our municipalities suffer the same things, really could be most helpful in dealing with the higher levels of Con Ed at the operational level, as well as the state. Because again, the day-to-day contacts that we have don't necessarily get to make the decisions on a lot of the issues that have to do with communication, coordination, work. Those are done at a completely different level. And you know, often with good reason, but as we all know, when you're working on a very large scale, the unintended consequences of that may not be you know, as easy to identify proactively. So I would also really implore the Board of Trustees that this is an advocacy effort where your help would be, you know, your support and your help could be enormously effective in dealing with some of the larger, more systemic issues of dealing with large organizations like Con Edison, and as well as our partners at the state who also are responsible for our major thoroughfares.
Thank you, Karen. And I want to jump on this. So I want to thank, obviously, Omar for all the work that you had done. I wish it could have been more light poles involved in that, not just street, just as a sign note, you know. Not to diminish, I think, you know, that is an overall problem, communication. So I want to kind of go back a little bit and piggybacking what Karen said, because I was thinking the same thing. Paul and your whole department, thank you. You guys do an amazing job. Sometimes it's, and that's conversations that we had in the past, like why you don't advertise this. Sometimes it's being humble. Sometimes we do things, we just do those things, you know, and I know you do it a lot of that. But one of the biggest issues that Omar, Stuart, and myself had talked in the past is like, how do we help them? How do we help those departments that sometimes other people from the state to the county are not responding to them, to our staff? So we need to step into that. So I agree with you, Karen, 100%. You know, it's not just updating the website. It's not just doing this. It's not just doing little things in the municipal level, but it's actually doing in the state level and the county level. You know, how do we do this? We're not going to have Karen do that for us. I'm not expecting Paul to do that. It's we, the five of us, sending a letter, sending a communication, and that's something the Stuart said. We can send out a letter every week. You know, where is this? Where is that? Where is all this communication? Because without that, Paul and his department have nothing. What are the updates that he's going to be putting on his website? Nothing. If the communication, if we, as a politicians that we are, sure, because we are elected to serve our community, are not doing anything. So it's not so much of, you know, the website. Don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from that. I think it's important, the communication. I think we need to have that. But if there's nothing to communicate, how do we respond to that? So a lot of this, I want to say, falls on our shoulders as well. And I'm with you, Omar. Frustration is being not just a year, 2 years from now. My frustration has been for years in regards to this whole thing. So if we can put something together on behalf of the Board of Trustees for the Village of Austin and start sending emails out and start sending formal letters to the county. And it's not just for election time. I really, you know, to me, that's irrelevant. We should be communicating with whoever is on those seats every day if we have to get the answers that we need and the answers that we need to, you know, communicate to our community. That's what we should be doing. So I think that's the part that I think when Omar was talking about, I think that to me, I want to say is the bigger portion of the bigger picture for me. For me, that's the bigger picture than anything else. So.
Yeah, I just want to quickly respond to that. So we're in total agreement, Manny. The way when I've thought about this a lot, and I see this as a long-term project. And when thinking about what's the best way to address this issue, I wanted to start with what was manageable, realistic, and the first step. And so I see this as the first step. You know, you can imagine if I'm like, and here's a presentation, here's what we're doing on the county level. It's like, what are you doing on the county level? It's like, okay, so let's start with what's right in front of us and build momentum and say, and that way it's not just the 5 of us. Yes, we're the representatives, but of who? The village, and have folks in the village that are out there. There's so many smart, talented people out there that can help us and be able to get this work done. I want to get folks in the community involved in this effort as well. And I don't know, I had something else, but that was it.
Yeah, so I just want to remind everybody, to me, it was obvious. So we're all in agreement, I think. This presentation isn't actually for the staff, the presentation's to the board. And so the ask is actually of the board. And I think we're in agreement. It's a multi-pronged approach. There are improvements done locally, then there's at the state. And the reason I say we're in a middle of election is because this is an opportune time also that people are not in session, right? Because they're local, they're not in session right now. This is a good time to do it, and we should start with Pete Harkin. Also, Elijah's still representing us at this point. I don't know if he's done anything on it. It's unclear to me. So there's roles for the electeds, there's roles for the village manager's office, there's roles for DPW in this. And I think that we don't usually get presentations from a trustee. I think that's why it was done this way, to say there are the different levels. Everybody moves on their level, one step forward, each of these levels, we're going to be much better off for it, and it's doable. If we can move 2 steps forward, for sure. The easiest one to get in touch with is Pete Harkin. I'm happy to do it. I think letters were written, if I'm not mistaken, by Sandy Gale a couple or so weeks ago about this topic. Maybe we take that letter and jump on it and see what she said to the state. Maybe we leverage that. So I think you're right. The legislative body needs to do. It seems, unless I'm mistaken, that the legislation is already in place, which I'm happy to hear. I thought we would have to do something about that, but doesn't seem like it. So I think we've covered the bases, which is the point of the presentation. Am I right about that, folks? Yes?
Mayor, may I add,
Right.
a couple of points? One is, guilty of, I'll use Trustee Casada's word, maybe we are a little humble up there. We just do the work. We maybe don't promote ourselves so well. But yeah, we will do that on the idea that we are being more educational to the public and informative rather. So that's on me, and I will look to expand that. Definitely. Constructive criticism. So thank you for that. Second is, if you were able to pull some of the aforementioned higher ranking state officials into this fray, and they were interested in looking at an Ossining-centric issue, I would be glad to point out and provide my technical input into where I think the faults are, including the double poll issues and everything else. I would be happy to facilitate that. And my last comment is really a cheap plug maybe, but the mayor did mention it. The intersection work that she referenced is actually working with Corporation Council, have established a notice to bidders going out at the end of August, August 23rd. And we're going to open those bids in September 13th. So that's I think you all know that that's a project that I've been, kind of chomping at the bit to commence work there. And we will do that right after we have an award. And I think it should get a lot of attention because it's a nice project, and it's going to be a big improvement for down there. And we have been, and we will do it again prior to actually commencing with the work, alert Con Ed to this work in the event that they may have some plans to do any excavation in that area.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't give you a round on that project or a roundabout process.
Keep saying that, Manny. All right, folks. What's the matter, Dana?
Oh,
Were you waving something?
yeah, said roundabout, and I just had.
Oh, you went like this. Okay, I got it. Sorry. All right, now we're going to look. It's long overdue. It's going to be very helpful to our downtown It's exciting. It's something, it's ours. It's what we own. It's not a state project. It's not, but there are a lot of other projects going on. There's, you know, the building down at the old DPW site. So it's really important that we get this stuff done, right? The communication, the website, we get it done now. It'll be good for the community, but now it will be in place when we start with other projects, which I think is why it's also an important discussion. So anyway, I think we've covered the bases, the 3 levels, the responsibility. The board will have to discuss how we move to the next, you know, our role, as we discussed. Is there anything else that we need to discuss?
I'd just like to say that for the communication piece, you know, I see a lot of comments on social media and a lot of people just simply do not understand that there are roads we cannot fix because they're not our roads. And that in and of itself is a big piece of education to get out there. And, you know, I'm certainly, you know, and I do think with all the projects coming up, we do need to obviously communicate all this infrastructure stuff that's going to be going on. So I'm happy to offer my services in any way. And I think that is the more we can push out facts and that sort of thing. And it'll be good.
Yep. I mean, we're all in agreement. No one should get defensive what they have done or haven't done. I heard absolutely no complaints in anything said tonight, except to say, I think it could be done better. That's at least what I heard. Is there anything else for tonight, Village Manager? Thank you, Paul, for staying with us this late. Oh, Marissa's with us still. Wow. Okay.
That concludes our agenda for this evening. We also have Lieutenant Donahue who stayed with us too. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lieutenant. On my screen,
you
you're way in the bottom. I thought you left.
Thank you to Lieutenant Donahue. Thank you all. That concludes our evening's program.
Great. Then let me say good night to everybody. It is 10:33. A reminder for those who like to watch after the fact and look at our recordings, no meetings for the next 2 Wednesdays, and we never meet on a 5th Wednesday. Next time we are together again would be in the first week of September. So please enjoy the Labor Day because we will not be seeing you before then. Good night, everybody.
I'm sorry, Mayor, will that be?
Oh, you have to vote. I'm
person?
sorry.
No, will that be in person, Stuart? Correct? Sure, if they don't change anything else?
We don't know yet.
Depends upon the
They'll let
executive
us
order,
know.
which has not, the executive order, current one expires in a couple of days. So far, the governor has not issued a new executive order.
Right.
If I were a betting person, I would say it's continued.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
All right,
especially
thank
with
you,
schools
Stuart.
going, she's going to want to see what the schools going back in session, how the numbers. I would if I were her, but I'm not her. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, very productive meeting. No exec session. Have a good evening.
Night.
Good night.